Chapter 14:13. Jing Shu and Zhang Yuyao didn't know what medical hygiene was, nor did they know what physiological hygiene was, but in their opinion, it was just about cleanliness. But thinking about what Zhang Feng said just now, they instantly felt that everywhere was dirty. Those chefs, which one of them didn't have a handful of salt, a handful of vegetables, a handful of meat, and then a handful of sweat and snot? They didn't notice it before, but at this time, Zhang Feng said so. At this time, the two girls were scared and didn't dare to go outside to eat. Even outside of this villa, they didn't dare to eat anything in other places. For example, the barbecue made by Zhang Feng on the street. That thing, now that they thought about it, they even wondered how they ate it in the first place. Zhang Feng saw that the two girls' faces were extremely pale, so he couldn't say anything more. He hurriedly said that, in fact, this thing is to pay attention to hygiene, to avoid bacterial infection. The space we live in is full of bacteria, and all the diseases we know such as fever, cold, headache, cough, diarrhea, and so on, are all bacterial infections. In order to not be infected by bacteria, we have to do something else, such as disinfection, alcohol, wine, salt, vinegar. They are all good things for disinfection. Zhang Feng explained the physiological hygiene knowledge to the two girls in detail. In an instant, the two girls shrank into a ball in horror and said, "Prince Zhang, why don't you get some mugwort and realgar to smoke the house? I see a lot of things." Zhang Feng looked and saw a beam of sunlight shining on the ground through the gap of the window, and in that beam of light, a little bit of dense dust flew up and down in the beam of light. Seeing this, Zhang Feng laughed and said, "This thing can't be helped. The things I said can't be seen with the naked eye. Forget it. I'll get some soap later. With that thing, it will be much better to wash and bathe every day. That thing can also make the skin tender." These were two words that they had never heard of. This made Jing Shu and Zhang Yuyao extremely mad. They even had the impulse to bite Zhang Feng to death. In his eyes, why was everything he saw poisonous? At this time, a whisper came from the gap of the window, making Jing Shu and Zhang Yuyao, who were playing with Zhang Feng, blush to their necks. Originally, they just wanted to make Zhang Feng happy. After all, such a big thing happened yesterday. Zhang Feng must be very uncomfortable. But who knew that these people dared to eavesdrop and let them see such a shameful thing? The two girls stomped their feet, turned around and rushed to the second floor. Zhang Feng was also speechless. But more than that, he was annoyed. He glared at the door and said, "Are you all here? Get in here. I've been waiting for you since last night. Where did you go?" Li Chengqian and the others were stunned. They looked at Cheng Chumo and the others and said, "Fengzi, I just came up the mountain. There were too many things last night. I didn't finish until this morning." Zhang Feng knew this. After all, there were so many things. It would be strange if they weren't busy. He pursed his lips and looked at Cheng Chumo and the others, who were avoiding his gaze, and asked, "What about you?" We were also busy last night." Zhang Feng looked at them. How could he not know that these people must have gone to visit prostitutes last night? But he had no evidence. He could only say helplessly, "Since you're here, let's talk about the next thing." Seeing that Zhang Feng didn't continue to harp on it, they nodded hurriedly. Then, they returned to their original nature, smoking and lying on their backs. After they were all in position, Zhang Feng said speechlessly, "From tomorrow onwards, Tai Niu, Chong Zi de Sha, and the two brothers Yu Baolin and Gao Can will start military training." Gao Can, who was outside the door, heard this and ran in excitedly. Shiwa also ran in and asked, "Fengzi, what about me?" Zhang Feng looked at Shiwa and said, "I have other plans for you." Seeing that Li Qian, Du Bing and Feng Yai also wanted to ask, he hurriedly said, "I have other plans for you guys. Also, with your bodies, can you withstand the torture?" Cheng Chumo and the others were very excited. They had heard from Zhang Feng that he wanted to train them to be the elites of the elites. However, ever since Gao Can and Yuchi Baolin went to the barracks to learn military training, there was no more news. At this moment, Fengzi finally remembered this matter. Thank the heavens. However, this wasn't a good thing for Li Chengqian and the others. At this moment, they looked at Zhang Feng with some resentment. Zhang Feng stared back at them embarrassedly and said, "I said don't look at me. You guys have more important things to do. Do you want the explosives I mentioned? If you want, then make them yourself." Hearing this, Li Chengqian and the others finally calmed down. Cheng Chumo and the others didn't care. Zhang Feng pointed at Yuchi Baolin and Gao Can and said, "Wait, the two of you should let them familiarize themselves with this military training method first. Tomorrow, I will have Old Ma and Jia Daoren teach you the military's joint attack technique, as well as the individual combat ability. As for the rest, I will personally teach you. Tonight, I will give you one night, and tomorrow, at most, one day." Cheng Chumo and the others were already very excited. However, seeing Zhang Feng say these words so calmly, they couldn't help but ask curiously, "Feng Zi, what do you mean?" Zhang Feng looked at Cheng Chumo with a faint smile and said, "Because after tomorrow, your doomsday will come." Chapter 14:14. In an instant, Cheng Chumo and the others felt their hair stand on end. From what Yuchi Baolin had told them, what they had seen when they sneaked into the military camp, and the unspeakable pain of their friends in the military, they had thought that this was the worst they could do. However, they could accept it if they had to grit their teeth and become what Zhang Feng had promised to give them. However, looking at Zhang Feng now, it seemed that this was just the beginning? This was the reason why they were so scared. Cheng Chumo was furious. He hurriedly squatted beside Zhang Feng and massaged Zhang Feng's legs while asking, "Feng Zi, what are you planning to do?" How could Zhang Feng not know what they were planning at this time? He looked at them with a smile and said, "Actually, it's nothing much. I'm planning to form a special forces team. Yesterday's incident was a lesson. I, Zhang Feng, am not a pushover. I don't like to be watched and led by the nose. Therefore, I've decided to train you into a team of kings who walk in the dark. In the future, you will be able to find the big hand outside and get rid of them quickly. From now on, Li Qian and the others will be mainly responsible for the development and creation of weapons and new things, as well as experiments and so on. I'll give you priority to use all the good things they come up with. However, there's only one condition, and that is to hide yourselves well, use your strengths, and stir up the world for me." In an instant, everyone was aghast. This time, Zhang Feng was really going to be serious. Li Chengqian seemed to have thought of something. He said in surprise, "So this is why you modified the crossbow, the composite bow and musket you mentioned, and why you wanted to train them to become the strongest heavy cavalry, the strongest light cavalry, and the king of assassins?" After Li Chengqian said this, Cheng Chumo and the others realized in horror. Had Zhang Feng already planned everything when he promised to teach them how to become the best troops in the world? Oh my God! How big of a plan and how terrifying of a setup was it to accomplish all of this? Although Yuchi Baolin and the rest didn't know what they were talking about, Cheng Chumo and the rest's expressions made them realize that something was amiss. Come to think of it, none of this happened when Zhang Feng set up this workshop. However, after what had happened at that time, as well as what had happened today, they were horrified to discover the crux of the problem. It was as if Zhang Feng was setting up a huge trap. At the thought of this, Zhang Feng's villa was instantly filled with gasps. However, at that time, Zhang Feng really didn't think so much. At that time, his target was the Guanlong group, as well as the 5 surnames and 7 great clans. But who would have thought that there would be such a terrifying force behind these two forces? This was simply beyond the scope of Zhang Feng's understanding. Zhang Feng even searched through every corner of his mind, but could not find anything related to this in the known history. This was the scariest part. At one point, Zhang Feng even thought that this was caused by his transmigration, which caused the space to distort. And this world was different from the world he knew, so there were some differences in the 99% similarity. He couldn't figure it out. Why was this happening? This was what he found most inconceivable. That was why he used the original plan to deal with Guanlong and the 5 surnames and 7 great clans here. Zhang Feng nodded. Then he shook his head and said, "Back then I didn't think so far ahead. I only targeted Guanlong and the 5 surnames and 7 great clans, but who would have thought that such a thing would happen?" And Zhang Feng's answer also made Li Shimin and the others, who had just arrived at the door, hurriedly stop and listen carefully. Zhang Feng said, "In fact, it's very simple. I don't like to be watched by others, and I don't like to be manipulated by others. Instead of waiting to play tricks and schemes, it's better for me to do it myself, and return peace to all the people I care about. Therefore, in the next 1 month or even 2 months of urgent training, I will squeeze out all your potential in the shortest time possible, and then let you truly love you, and find the fighting method you are best at in the shortest time possible. For example, Iron Bull, you must not only display your own brute force, but also your stubborn nature, you must display it to the extreme. Public opinion is the most fatal weapon. You should have seen it yesterday. In fact, those methods of theirs were used by us, but we were not that shameless. It was also because of yesterday's matter that gave me a hint. If you want to stand firm, you have to be more shameless than the enemy. Sometimes, shamelessness is an extremely terrifying weapon. This made the faces of Li Shimin and the others turn black. They were about to enter the room, but were stopped by Wei Zheng. Li Shimin frowned, but after hearing Zhang Feng's next plan, he was even more shocked. He couldn't help but ask, "Feng Zi, is what you said true? If it's true, I will fully support you in this matter. I heard that you want 50 people for the whole team? I think it's a little too little. I'll give you 500 experts. How about it?" Chapter 14-15. Hearing this, Zhang Feng suddenly looked at the door and said in surprise, "My goodness, when did you get here? Have you found out anything about yesterday's incident?" As Li Shimin spoke, he hurried into the room with Wei Zhang and the others. He waved his hand and said, "Let's not talk about it for now. Tell me about your plan." Zhang Feng repeated what he had said before. Li Shimin's eyes narrowed slightly and said, "According to what you said, you want to set up a spy in the Tang dynasty? Not just one spy, but a spy network." Hearing Zhang Feng's words, Wei Zhang hurriedly said, "No. Absolutely not. This is the Tang dynasty. If the emperor finds out about this, or if others find out about it, it will be a crime that will lead to the extermination of the whole family. Feng Zi, you have to think about it carefully. The emperor may not care about the special forces you want to set up, but have you ever thought that the emperor, the ministers, or those big clans don't have spies? Do you know what we found out about yesterday's incident?" Li Shimin was also a little confused at this time. He ignored Wei Zheng. Seeing this, Wei Zhang said, "Feng Zi, I know you have ideas and thoughts, but you should know that such a thing is not allowed in any dynasty or country, let alone in the Tang dynasty." Zhang Feng hurriedly interrupted Wei Zhang. He was almost led astray by Old Wei. He hurriedly said, "Old Wei, why does everything you say have something to do with the imperial court? My special force is actually the security team on the mountain, but it's for the outside world. Our industry is now spread all over Chong and many places near Chong'an. Moreover, the opening of the waterway also needs some security guards to maintain the normal business order, right? We don't participate in other things. We just want to prevent people from targeting us. What's wrong with that? Besides, it's not like we haven't done such things in Chong'an City before." Wei Zhang asked suspiciously, "What are you talking about?" "It's the method that I mentioned before. We used to promote deep-fried locusts, bone-strengthening powder, and so on. What's more, what Tai Nyo and the others need to do now is to focus on the rumors of the 5 families and 7 major clans, Guanlong, and Shandong landlords, and draw out the pair of big hands behind them. Only in this way can we ensure that Shao Mountain and even Chong'an City won't fall into chaos. Actually, this is also called diverting the disaster." Feng Xianling was a little confused and asked, "Then why did you let them do this?" "That's right, Feng Zi. If it's just creating rumors, these kids are all talented and can do it easily. Why do they need to learn these things?" Yu Qigong and the others asked curiously. Zhang Feng nodded and said, "You're all right. In fact, that's what this thing means. However, have you ever thought about it? Is it just to create rumors? What's the purpose of creating rumors? We're doing this because we want to find out the real culprit behind this. In the next quarter of an hour, I'll train them on their ability to resist attacks, their endurance, their reaction speed, their ability to distinguish positions by listening, and their ability to react quickly. These are all necessary skills, and they'll be able to settle down in the future. I don't need them to kill people. In fact, I'm doing this for them to protect themselves." Yes. Give them the ability to protect themselves. This time, everyone was in an uproar. Cheng Chumo and the others felt even more uncomfortable. These things seemed very simple. He knew all about sensitivity and so on. But what did it mean by protect themselves? Could it be? At this time, Li Shimin's expression became a little solemn. At the same time, he was also a little conflicted. This group of people, if successfully trained, would be very important to the imperial power in the imperial court. But the only bad thing was that if these people's identities were discovered, what would happen to the imperial court? What would happen to the big hand behind this? If all these were discovered to be Zhang Feng's idea, or if these people's faces were seen by others, then... Fengzi, why don't we do this later? I think it's too risky. Think about it, if these people are recognized, what will happen? Zhang Feng nodded and said, I know this. Li Shimin was stunned. If you know, then why do you still do it? Because I know, that's why I have to get them out. Have you ever thought about why I only want 50 people and not more? Li Shimin really didn't know about this. Zhang Feng looked around and said, in fact, I want to divide them into 5 teams. Tai Nyo and the others will be the team leaders, and I'll specially make clothes, equipment, masks, and so on suitable for them. I want them to be the most terrifying existence in the world. Have you ever thought about how the Emperor will feel if he knows about this? Li Shimin's voice fell. In an instant, everyone looked slightly surprised. They subconsciously looked at Zhang Feng, waiting for his answer. This time, the Emperor seemed to be really angry. This was really a difficult thing to do. If it was not done well, the world would be in chaos. Zhang Feng spread out his hands and pointed at Cheng Chumo and the others. That's why I arranged 6 of them. The extra one will be the team leader of the special forces, and the team leader will be rotated every 3 months. Most importantly, why did I choose retired soldiers? Do you know the reason? Chapter 14:16. Who could guess what Zhang Feng was thinking? Hearing Zhang Feng's words at this time, Li Shimin was unhappy, but he still asked, what's your plan? Zhang Feng smiled faintly and said, these people have good qualities and are loyal to the Emperor and patriotism. Although they have retired, they are still in contact with people in the army, such as superiors, brothers, and so on. Their existence will inevitably be passed to the Emperor's ears. And if my guess is right, the Emperor will not touch our people for the time being. Li Shimin's expression became a little strange and said, are you so sure? So sure. You don't believe me, Lao Li? Go and ask old you. This guy almost choked me to death last time when I wanted to build a fully automatic textile factory. Why did he do that? Don't you know that he sends a lot of materials to his brothers in the army every year? Hearing this, Li Shimin suddenly understood. Although he had known this for a long time and knew that this matter was fake, it was fake after all. At this time, Zhang Feng was telling the truth. Zhang Feng didn't wait for Li Shimin to ask and continued. In fact, they will think that they are just passing on the materials between brothers. But what they don't know is that these generals are the god of war of the Tang dynasty. How can they escape from their eyes and ears? Yu Qigong, Niu Jinda, Chang Yaojin, and the others heard this and couldn't help but feel a little happy in their hearts. But the next moment, Zhang Feng said again, and if they know these things, who will they tell? Of course it will be the Emperor. These people are loyal to the Emperor, which is not comparable to ordinary people. But these people also have a disadvantage, which is that they like to drink too much. When they drink, they like to quarrel, and when they quarrel, they like to scare and brag. If we want to keep this matter a secret, we'll have to rely on His Majesty's actions. Everything we've done has been done from the perspective of the Great Tang, so you can be at ease. His Majesty won't blame us and will only support us even more. Moreover, once we defeat this major clan, the one who will benefit the most will still be His Majesty. Do you think His Majesty is a fool? Does he really want to rush up and fight these big aristocratic families? Li Shimin wanted to laugh. Is this how I am in your heart? Li Shimin was speechless and asked, this is just your guess. If the Emperor knows this, why do you think he will choose to believe it? And what if other ministers, such as the civil officials, know it? Then you're thinking too much. Zhang Feng waved his hand and said, Lao Li, you just don't pay attention to the court. Think about it, how many people in the court are profiting because of the salt, the trade with Zhenla, the beer, barbecue, and other things? These are all our things. At this time, they have long been used to this way of eating. Brewing beer, making salt, making braised meat, and removing the smell of pig's meat are all in our hands. How can they not think of the pros and cons? We're dealing with a common enemy. Only by killing all these guys can we truly make a fortune together. Old Li, do you think you'll end up like you because of those old foxes? There's also Lao Li. Zhang Feng patted Li Shimin on the shoulder and said, you are really not suitable for business. But fortunately, you have Lao Li. Also, I found a good seedling for you. If you train him with all your strength, I believe that in less than 10 years, even if you don't want any title, You can stomp your feet in any country and the emperor will come running to invite you. Do you believe it? Haha. Li Shimin laughed with a fake smile. Hearing this, Zhang Feng wanted to slap him. Of course he was talking about the money string. However, this guy needed to be properly trained. He definitely couldn't do it here. With two beautiful fiancés around, others might not feel at ease, but he, Zhang Feng, couldn't. So at this time, teaching Chen Xiang was difficult. He thought he could use this opportunity to push him to Lao Li, but this old thing was too cunning and didn't take the bait at all. Zhang Feng could only say helplessly, "Actually, these are not important. The most important thing is that if the emperor wants to hold power and defeat these big clans, he has to stand with me. It's that simple. In addition, the Great Tang's economy is currently flourishing. How could His Majesty allow these great clans to sway? For example, during the autumn planting this time, the Wang clan suddenly cut off the ironware supply. If something like this happens again, then it will be an extremely terrifying existence." Hearing this, Li Shimin coughed confidently and said, "Fengzi, let me tell you a piece of good news. In Chang'an City, more than a dozen ironware shops and blacksmiths were all opened yesterday afternoon and today morning." Huh? Zhang Feng couldn't wrap his head around it. After a while he asked, "What you said, is it true? They really opened all of them?" Li Shimin spread his hands and said calmly, "Do I need to lie to you?" Zhang Feng heard this and was instantly dumbfounded. What the F***ck is this? Chapter 14-17. The ironware workshops in Chang, and were basically managed by the Ironware Bureau of the Agriculture Department of the Ministry of Works. No one knew whether it was good or bad that such a big problem occurred at this time. Shut it down. Then shut it down. But why would it be opened again at this time? What kind of operation was this? Everyone saw clearly what happened in Chang'an City yesterday. At this time, to open this thing in Chang'an City was to court death. What was the meaning of this? Was it deliberately aimed at them? Zhang Feng really didn't understand. At this time, to get all these people out, there was no doubt that there was a problem. Did the Wang family really want to confront them? Li Shimin saw Zhang Feng's doubts and gently waved his hand. Feng Xianling said, "Fengzi, do you know what the emperor found out since these shops opened yesterday and when we went up the mountain today?" Zhang Feng naturally didn't know, so he asked, "What did he find out?" Feng Xianling smiled faintly and inadvertently glanced at Li Shimin. Seeing that Li Shimin didn't speak, he said slowly, "There are other people behind these shops, but some of them are local people in Chang'an. When the farming season comes, these people will bring things to the fields to sell their farm tools, so. But not everyone is like this. This is just a part of them. Some of them also have farms in their families. I think there are strict rules in their laws. During the autumn planting season, no matter what happens, they can't affect or delay the planting. Those who violate the rules will be severely punished. And 5 of them are from the Wang family, but they are all collateral relatives of the Wang family. They have nothing to do with the Wang family." The last sentence was the key point. Zhang Feng couldn't help but frown deeply when he heard that. You mean, the Wang family really doesn't know what happened in Chang'an City? That's too strange, isn't it? Think about it. This is the Wang family. And where was this place? After investigating so many things, almost all of them have the Wang clan's shadow. Look, after returning from Nantian, it was the iron mine that suddenly ran out of stock. Then, they went to the 4 major clans to cause trouble. Which one of them didn't have the Wang clan's shadow behind them? Now you're telling me that this wasn't done by the Wang family? Is this a joke? Zhang Feng suspected that Lao Li had been bribed by the Wang family. Who couldn't see such an obvious thing? Most importantly, the Wang family had always been in contact with them the most. They were also the most suspicious. At this time, no matter who it was, the Wang family had nothing to do with this matter. Zhang Feng could only respond with a chuckle. However, he never thought that it would be Lao Li's son who told him about this. This was what surprised him the most. "Lao Li, what benefits did the Wang family give you to make you speak for them like this?" Li Shimin shook his head and sighed. If only that were the case. Think about it, what benefits does the Wang family get by targeting us, the emperor, and the people of the world? This is a criminal law that even a 3-year-old child knows about. Do you think the Wang clan's people don't know? At first, I also suspected that the Wang clan was behind all this. However, when Lord Zhang's son personally showed me the results of the investigation last night, I realized that the Wang family seemed to be pushed out by someone, just like Kong Yingda. Ha! Zhang Feng's hair stood on end when he heard that. The Wang clan was pushed out to be a shield? How was that possible? Who was so charming that the Wang clan was willing to be a shield? For a moment, Zhang Feng felt that this hand seemed to be too big. From the war at the border, to some people in the imperial court, to the 5 families and 7 clans, to the nobles in Shandong. Could it be? Zhang Feng's expression changed instantly. Could it be that the people in Guanlong were also instructed by them? But they were unintentionally destroyed by him, and he even got his allies, which made this mysterious person angry out of humiliation. Thinking of this, Zhang Feng suddenly understood. It seemed that everything made sense. From the incident in Nantian to the return to Chang'an, these things seemed to have just begun to brew. All of this really seemed like revenge. When he thought of this, the question returned to the original starting point. Was this manipulated by someone? Or what? Otherwise, why would these shops that didn't belong to the same power choose to open at the same time overnight? It didn't make sense at all. And most importantly, after what happened in Chang'an City yesterday, no one would choose to open at this time, right? Zhang Feng's face gradually became gloomy. He said lightly, I understand. This is a threat. Li Shimin nodded. You're right. I didn't notice it before, but this morning I figured out why these people chose to open at the same time yesterday, and why the power behind the Mi family, Bai family, Tang family, and Gao family didn't do anything. As he spoke, Li Shimin said with a grave expression, Fengzi, have you ever thought that these people might have been fabricated by someone? In fact, how could there be any nobles behind them? Chapter 14:18. In fact, Zhang Feng had already thought of Li Shimin's idea just now. However, this matter was too mysterious. Zhang Feng himself didn't believe it. How could such a thing happen? But now that Li Shimin said this, Zhang Feng's expression couldn't help but stagnate. Zhang Feng's expression was extremely solemn. He didn't speak. He sat there and smoked while thinking about things. After thinking for a while, he said, You're right. I also thought about it. But don't you think that if this matter is really as you said, it's too scary? What are you talking about? Why are you so anxious? Fengzi, just tell me, who do you want to beat up? I'll find someone to beat him up now. Chang Yaojin couldn't stand it. He rolled up his sleeves and was about to beat someone up. Feng Xianling hurriedly pulled Chang Yaojin back and said, Old Hey, calm down first. This matter has to be done slowly. Now we don't even know who is causing trouble. How are we going to deal with it? Who do we beat up? Tell me about it. You can't beat up whoever you don't like, right? It's still better than being cooped up here. This is 2F** King frustrating. Chang Yaojin said indignantly. Zhang Feng didn't know that this was a provocation. He said speechlessly, I say, old Chen, if you want to find an excuse, can't you find a better one? It's not fun to play like this. Well, since you said this, then I'll explain it to you. In fact, this matter will be solved eventually. But as for how to solve it, that's secondary. Aren't I building a special team now? When my special forces team is done, there won't be any monsters to hide. Chang Yaojin curled his lips and said, With your people, the dishes will be cold by the time you're done. Li Shimin nodded slightly and glared at Chang Yaojin. Chang Yaojin immediately shut up. In fact, Li Shimin had been worried about this for a long time. When he was outside the door, Li Shimin heard his conversation and knew some of the ways and means. 2 months. Within these 2 months, it could happen at any time. It couldn't wait for 2 months. Seeing this, Zhang Feng glanced at Li Shimin and said, I really underestimated you. Yes, I do have a plan that I haven't told you. Li Shimin guessed that Zhang Feng had other plans. He hurriedly asked, Then tell me, what do you think? Zhang Feng gestured for everyone to sit down, then slowly said, Actually, Tyne Yo and the others really need to go and train. This is the last step. They will only be used as a last resort. At the very least, they will be able to form a fighting force after 2 months. Only then will they be able to determine victory and defeat. During this period, we have to find the mastermind behind this. I have a terrible intuition that this mastermind's plot may not be simple. Li Shimin's face suddenly changed. From the border issue to the arms smuggling, and to some things that could be manipulated in Chang'an, it seemed that this mastermind's plot was not small. But it didn't seem to be a big deal, right? But this matter revealed a hint of strangeness. Everything was too coincidental. Coincidentally, right after the Tang dynasty dealt with the food shortage, there was a border war, which scattered most of the Tang dynasty's forces. Even more coincidentally, India and the Turks suddenly formed an alliance at this time, not to target the Tang dynasty, nor Tubo and other countries. Instead, they chose a remote place, Zhenla. What was their intention? Zhenla was surrounded. He had guessed that the emperor would send troops to help. If the emperor didn't send troops, Zhenla and the Potato Kingdom would think that they had no ability to estimate their allies. Once this idea was formed, it would instantly damage the reputation of the Tang dynasty. In this case, it could easily cause the prestige of the Tang dynasty to be damaged. Shirwei, Goguryeo, Zhenla, Tubo, Tuyuhun, and other countries in the north would instantly panic. If anything happened to the Tang dynasty, they would definitely send troops at the first moment. What was his intention? As he thought of this, Li Shimin hurriedly asked, Fengzi, what do you think this mysterious person or mysterious thing is scheming? Imperial power. Zhang Feng really didn't want to say this word. However, after thinking about it, he decided not to say it out loud. After all, if the emperor were to find out about it, or if other people with ulterior motives were to hear it, he would be completely finished. This wasn't talking about imperial politics, it was courting death. The current crown prince, Li Changqian, or Li Tai could be the culprit. But he had heard that Li Tai was only 6 or 7 years old. What would a child like him know? As for Li Changqian, although there was indeed a case of Li Changqian usurping the throne in history, it was because of Li Tai. But there was no need for him to make preparations so early, right? And that Hou Junji didn't seem to be doing much at this time. Zhang Feng had seen Hou Junji before, so he paid close attention to him. This man was the main culprit behind Li Changqian's coup. But given the current situation of the Tang dynasty, as long as Hou Junji wasn't a fool, he wouldn't allow Li Changqian to jump out at this time. Moreover, these matters were far too complicated. Zhang Feng had thought that the mastermind behind the scenes might be Hou Junji. After all, this man had once been a famous scholar, and his son had a rather high prestige in the military. The reason he had bravely retreated to protect himself was because he wanted to support Crown Prince Li Changqian. But, at present, Hou Junji didn't seem to have the ability to make the people of the 5 clans and 7 clans and the nobles of Shandong listen to his orders. And there was also the problem of the border. He was Hou Junji. What ability did he have to lay down such a terrifying net? Was he worthy? Chapter 14:19. Alas! Zhang Feng rubbed his head with a headache. He really couldn't figure out who had such great ability to do such an awesome step. Damn it, it was impossible to succeed. Now that he thought about it, it seemed that all of this was really impossible. After all, the probability of success was almost 0. Could it be that several forces joined forces? Just like Guanlong and the people of the 5 surnames and 7 clans supported Li Yuan to overthrow Yang Guang? Zhang Feng had an even bigger headache at this time. He rubbed his temples and said, Forget it, forget it. Let's not think about it. It's not good for us to guess blindly here. After all, even if the sky falls, there are still tall people to hold it up for us. Li Shimin didn't like to hear this. Why did you stop at the critical moment? I've already prepared, and you're telling me this? Li Shimin said speechlessly, Fengzi, just say it. Although there is a tall person to hold it up. Could it be that the tall person you're talking about is the emperor? Zhang Feng nodded. Yes, who else do you think has such ability? Li Shimin was immediately unhappy. What the hell was this? He hurriedly said, Don't be like this. Tell me, what is your guess? Fang Xianling and the others also looked at Zhang Feng anxiously. If Zhang Feng could really guess the person or direction, then they would have a direction to pursue. They wouldn't be led by the nose like now, right? Zhang Feng looked at everyone strangely and said, I think there's something wrong with your heads. The emperor hasn't said anything. What are you shouting for? And wasn't yesterday's lesson enough? You want to find trouble for me again today, right? Li Shimin's face stiffened when he heard this. While coughing, he kicked Fang Xianling and Wei Zhang, making them pretend that they didn't notice. They lowered their heads and pondered. Li Shimin had no choice but to bite the bullet and say, Aren't we just chatting for fun? Besides, what's the big deal if you say it roughly? We still have some precautions, don't we? It's better than not knowing anything, right? If we really encounter a problem at that time, it will be too late even if we want to pull down our businesses. This loss, sigh. Li Shimin poured out a lot of bitter water. To put it bluntly, he just wanted Zhang Feng to say 1, 2, 3. He knew that Zhang Feng must have known something. But this was also a coincidence. Zhang Feng really wasn't acting tough this time. He really didn't expect this. But Li Shimin didn't believe it. Zhang Feng couldn't help but want to slap himself. All right, don't think too much. This time, I really didn't know what went wrong. And I really didn't know who was behind it. If I knew who was behind it, do you think Zhang Feng, would still be sitting here right now? Li Shimin sighed in disappointment. Things were back to square one. This undoubtedly made him feel even more depressed. He thought that Zhang Feng really knew who was behind it, but now it seemed that Zhang Feng didn't know the specifics. It seemed that this kid didn't know as much as I did this time. Li Shimin was a little happy. After all, it was rare to see Zhang Feng suffer. Looking at Zhang Feng, Li Shimin smacked his lips and said, Fengzi, didn't you just say that you wanted Li Gan and the others to get some gunpowder? What kind of operation is this? Right. At the mention of this, Li Shimin instantly remembered that Zhang Feng seemed to have said that there was still something to do. He hurriedly said, Didn't you just say that Tai Niu and the others were the last step? What about before that? It can't be that you want Gan and the others to use gunpowder, right? Zhang Feng wanted to say something, but seeing Li Shimin's annoying look, he finally held back. After a while, he said, Do you think that gunpowder is a wild vegetable by the roadside? That it will come as you say? That thing is prepared for Chotzi. Once it is delivered to Chotzi, it will set the beginning of our plan for the trade route. And the decisive power of this war has nothing to do with our plan. Don't even think about it. This thing is a hot potato. Whoever holds it will suffer. Later, I will make this thing and you will send it to the palace tonight. This thing will be a headache for the emperor. Also, during this period, I remember that Li Gan has a group of powerful people under him. Do you know Lao Li? Hearing this, Wei Zhang and the others were secretly shocked. Could it be that the crown prince was gathering power in the imperial court? Li Shimin's expression gradually became serious. He glanced at Wei Zhang and the others, then looked into Zhang Feng's eyes and asked, Fengzi, who told you about this? Why don't I know about it? What ability does he have to gather a group of powerful people? It is nothing more than a group of stubborn sons. Zhang Feng waved his hand and said, You misunderstood. I know that he can't hold a court meeting. What I mean is, does he know some hooligans in Chang'an City? I say, you mean Qian those spies in the city? Zhang Feng nodded and said, That's right. Same old rules. If Li Gan has such connections, I believe that your connections are even wider. What I want is your connections. Use the old ways to spread rumors about me. Chapter 14:20. The eyes of Li Shimin and the others lit up in an instant. That's right. An eye for an eye. In this case, as long as the momentum was built up, they really had a chance to get something out of these people. After all, villains were hard to guard against. Zhang Feng said again, In fact, it's easy to understand. Everyone is very tight-lipped, especially about this kind of thing. But it doesn't mean that everyone will be so tight-lipped. And the most important thing is that they always have a maid or some subordinates, right? As long as we change the direction of the spearhead, it's easy to get some clues. In the past, we always looked at the sky. Now, let's not look at the sky anymore. The things in the sky have already been killed by them. Now we only need to look at the ground. The water on the ground and the mud will leave a trace of their footprints, right? As long as we follow the footprints, it will always be easier. But this is also a matter of risk. Li Shimin was listening with great interest. At this time, when he heard Zhang Feng's words, he couldn't help but feel as if he had fallen into an abyss. He already had some ideas. At this time, when Zhang Feng said this, Li Shimin asked subconsciously, What's the risk? Isn't it just a matter of a sentence? For him, this was not even an imperial edict. Not to mention the crown prince, there were hundreds of spies in Chang, and under his command. And this kind of rumor had been around since the locusts. At this time it seemed to be the best way to use this. What these people did was somewhat similar to what Zhang Feng said. If they could find clues, they would basically erase them. Now it was really impossible to find clues from this. Thinking about it, Li Shimin said anxiously, Fengzi, are you worried that if this matter gets out of hand, it will arouse the emperor's anger? Zhang Feng nodded and said, Indeed. After all, this is under the emperor's rule. We have to be careful if we do something here. If someone tells the emperor and impeaches us, then, even if we have the support of Lord Zhang's son, the emperor will probably be angry. It's fine, it's fine. Lord Zhang's son told me about this method today. His Majesty seems to have the same idea, but it's just an idea. Now that you said it, I think it's feasible. Zhang Feng was surprised. You mean the emperor also has the same idea? Yes. Then why didn't you say so earlier? Zhang Feng glared and said, All right, since we've discussed it, there's no need to continue. After all, I don't know if there are any spies on the mountain. I'm prepared to make a big deal about Tai Nyo and the others. At the very least, I want everyone on the mountain to know that they are just a cover. They are the ones who are stirring up trouble on the surface. The ones who spread the rumors in Chang'an City are the main ones. Once they find clues, I will let Tai Nyo and the others take action. Didn't you say that the iron mine has recovered? If that's the case, it means that our people on Mount Longsho have found the ore. This is a good thing. This way, I can speed up the forging workshop on the mountain. At the same time, I won't let Li Gan and the rest leave the mountain for the time being. Once the phosphate fertilizer technology is confirmed and the phosphate fertilizer factory is set up, they will devote all their efforts to the research and development of this technology. The Research Institute. This was the lifeline of White Deer College. Rather than saying that Zhang Feng had built an academy, it was more accurate to say that the entire academy was a channel for the Research Institute to provide fresh blood. It was also a pretense. Once these people focused their attention on the academy itself, they would not be able to do anything. Only then would he have the chance to stir up trouble under their noses. For example, this bomb. This was the most important thing at the moment. Once he confirmed it, at the very least, there would be no wars at the border for the time being. Once it was delayed until the next spring, when the grains were harvested, everything would be much easier. With grains in hand, wouldn't it be a piece of cake for them to attack wherever they wanted? Now, all the food was concentrated in the hands of the wealthy families. There weren't many fields that belonged to the commoners. Zhang Feng didn't want to reform the farmland system. That would be courting death. Think about how Wang Mang died in history. This was a lesson learned from the mistakes of the past. This phosphate fertilizer project almost caused him to fail. When the time came, would he have to change the farmland system? Even if His Majesty agreed, would the other civil and military officials agree? It wasn't impossible to get them to agree. As long as their granaries were filled and their food became common goods, they would only worry about having more fields. To put it bluntly, it was still a lack of food. Once there was more food, how could there be such a problem? 10,000 miles. How could such a thing happen? Once he thought of Chen Wanli, Zhang Feng's expression darkened. Li Shimin also noticed the change in Zhang Feng's expression. He didn't know how to comfort him. He only sighed and said, Don't think about this anymore. We'll talk about it when we find the mastermind. All right, Fengzi, tell me. This phosphate fertilizer really has such a miraculous effect. Also, what exactly is that thing you planted in the East Court? Chapter 14:21. Zhang Feng was stunned. His expression changed in an instant. You went to my East Court? Li Shimin shook his head again and again. He pointed at Niu Jinda and said, I don't know. Ask him. In one sentence, he completely betrayed Niu Jinda. Niu Jinda was depressed. But who asked him to be the emperor? Niu Jinda had no choice but to bite the bullet and say with a smile, Well, last time, when he saw that the tiger leg was slightly better, he wanted to go and thank you. But we heard that you went down the mountain and thought that you were in your residence, so we went to visit you. But we didn't know what gift to bring, so we brought you a calligraphy and painting. That kid was very curious. He couldn't sit still and wanted to wander around the courtyard, saying that he wanted to breathe fresh air. In the end, he saw the old man at the entrance of the East Court. Niu Jinda knew that this matter could not be hidden, and he also wanted to know what that thing was. Even the imperial physician did not know what it was. It showed how precious this thing was. It had already happened. What could Zhang Feng say? He glared at Niu Jinda speechlessly and said, "Old Niu, I really didn't hide this matter. That thing is actually an experiment. I don't know if it will work. And the seed of that thing, as far as the current situation is concerned, there are only a few of us in the entire Tang dynasty. As for whether there are other places, I don't know. In short, I got it from a merchant in the western regions. I heard that it floated over from the other side of the sea." At this time, if Zhang Feng's history was true, then the magical potato should still be in America. And there was only one place that could float over from the sea. It must have come from the Strait of Sherway, from North America all the way across the sea, or because of a typhoon. This was the only explanation that could be found now. Then, it was obtained by these merchants as a treasure. But this thing was bitter raw, so no one knew what it was. It floated all the way to the western regions. In the end, it fell into Zhang Feng's hands. How many coincidences must there be for such a miraculous thing to happen? What if this thing got soaked in the seawater and became rotten? What if this thing sprouted along the way? That was the most amazing thing. After a series of coincidences, it fell into Zhang Feng's hands. It would be strange if Zhang Feng didn't treat it as a treasure. Zhang Feng explained, "This thing's scientific name is potato. It's a rare treasure in No. 1 middle school. As for how precious it is, I can't tell you for the time being. Anyway, I'll give you a surprise when the time comes." Seeing that Zhang Feng was unwilling to say, Li Shimin had no choice but to treat him as a treasure. Something that Zhang Feng treasured so much must be a treasure. But as for how precious it was, that was unknown. But in Li Shimin's opinion, no matter how precious it was, it shouldn't be like this, right? He didn't take it seriously and shook his head. That potato, did it also use this phosphate fertilizer? Zhang Feng nodded. "Didn't you all see it? Since you've seen it, why are you still asking me? Okay, don't ask anymore. If I say that phosphate fertilizer is useful, it's really useful. If there's nothing else, I'll go and do the experiment now. I'll try to get this thing done in a short time. Alright, Lao Li, have you found the factory I asked you to find?" Li Shimin saw that Zhang Feng brought the question back to the main topic and sighed. "It's done. Didn't old Niu find the phosphate stone mine at the south foot of Longzhou Mountain? I'm going to build the factory there. Behind that place is the royal plantation. Further south is the Daming Palace in Chang'an City. It's also the most heavily guarded place in Chang'an. Under normal circumstances, there won't be any problems. As for the factory, I've already found someone to build it. But that place is too barren. There's not even water. Are you sure you want to put it there?" "No water." Zhang Feng was stunned. Water was an important step in the extraction of phosphate fertilizer. If there was no water, it would be troublesome. Zhang Feng thought for a while and asked, "I remember that there's water on Longzhou Mountain, right? I have a map here. Take a look at it first." Li Shimin took out a map from his arms. This was a detailed map of the entire area from Daming Palace to Longzhou Mountain. However, this was a map that Li Shimin redrew after removing some important military advisors. Zhang Feng looked at the mountains and ravines on the map and couldn't help but frown slightly. The map was very detailed. The names and directions of the mountains were clearly marked on it. The area with the phosphate stone in the south foot of Longzhou Mountain wasn't big. It was just a mountain that extended to the royal plantation on the main peak of Longzhou Mountain. Perhaps it was because the soil and water here was too fertile that the emperor chose to build the royal plantation here? As for the area where the phosphate stone was located, although it was a stretch of sloping land, there wasn't a single river or canal. Perhaps this was why the emperor didn't choose to build the royal plantation here even though it was more fertile. Instead, he chose another place. This was difficult to handle. Zhang Feng couldn't help but feel somewhat distressed. Chapter 14:22. However, there was no water, so there was no way to make it. Moreover, the toxicity of this thing was too great. This piece of land was a wasteland. There was no trace of people within 100 miles. It was a natural barrier. It was a good choice to build the phosphate fertilizer factory here. If the factory was moved and the poisonous gas leaked out, it would be bad. It might even give people a reason to talk about it. Seeing Zhang Feng frowning, Li Shimin came forward and asked, "Take a look. What do you think of this place? If it doesn't work, just move it 10 miles south to the Longzhou Canal." "No. Zhang Feng interrupted Li Shimin and said, Lao Li, this thing can only be here. You know how important this thing is. Once people know too much about it, it will be fatal. Moreover, the raw stone of this thing is poisonous. If something happens to the palace, none of us will be able to handle it. Moreover, although the place is good and the transportation is convenient, this is also the drawback. Actually, this method of making phosphate fertilizer is not complicated. Anyone who learns it will be able to do it. Do you think that this business will be learned by others? At this moment, Li Shimin suddenly came to his senses. Then, tell me without water. What do we do? Zhang Feng snapped his fingers and said, Actually, there is a way to do this thing. Think about it. Who am I? I am Zhang Feng. Li Shimin rolled his eyes. If you have something to say, just say it. What time is it now? Are you still bragging? Zhang Feng was shocked by Li Shimin's words, but he was not angry. He chuckled and said, Now you know why I asked Li Gan and the rest to stay and do this, right? As he spoke, Zhang Feng shouted at the door, Shiva, go and call Li Gan and Du Bing over. I have something to tell them. Not long after, Li Chengqian and Du Go came in, but they looked reluctant. They had just heard everything from Shiva. Why was he calling them over now? Wasn't it because he wanted them to go to that place? Who would want to go to such a desolate and uninhabited place? However, he still had to enter the door. The emperor and other officials were present, so he did not dare to act rashly. As soon as he entered the door, Zhang Feng said with a smile, I remember that I asked you guys to make me a water wheel when the workshop just started, right? Li Chengqian was shocked when he heard this. If Zhang Feng hadn't mentioned it today, he would have forgotten about it long ago. Moreover, he had thought that Zhang Feng was joking about it. And how long had it been since Zhang Feng had mentioned it? Who would take it seriously? Besides, wasn't that a joke? If this thing could really be set up from the ground and made the water flow from the bottom to the top, would they still be here? Furthermore, this thing, damn it. How could this be done by a human? Li Shimin was also confused. They all stared at Zhang Feng, wanting to see what tricks he was going to play. Seeing Li Chengqian and Du go like this, Zhang Feng said, During this period of time, you guys have learned about physics and air and water resistance, right? Li Chengqian did not know what Zhang Feng wanted to ask, so he nodded subconsciously and said, Almost. Then I'll rely on you guys. How does water move? It moves according to the natural laws of gravity and geology. What's water pressure? Water pressure is... What's atmospheric pressure? Zhang Feng interrogated them carefully. Li Chengqian and Du Go could answer fluently, which made Du Ruhui and Li Shimin very excited. They stroked their beards and nodded calmly. It was as if this was how it was. After Zhang Feng interrogated them, he asked, Since you guys have understood this principle, I'll give you a task now. Bring water from the lake to all the villas and complete this project within 10 days. How about it? The water I'm talking about is to pass through the second-floor balcony of the villas, and then the water will have to return to the lake. Are you confident? This, Li Chengqian and Du Go were sweating profusely. If you were talking about ordinary water diversion, you could just dig a canal and complete it in less than 10 days. But you want to pass through the second-floor balcony of the villas? The two of them subconsciously looked at the second floor of the villa opposite the window. Then they looked at Hu in the distance and were stunned. Although this seemed simple, it was more difficult than passing water to the workshop. Li Chengqian said with a sobbing tone, Fengzi, why don't we go and connect the water to the workshop? This is too difficult. Think about it, although the lake is high up, this villa area is at least 10 feet above the lake. How can this work? Zhang Feng ignored Li Chengqian's complaints and said, Oh right, I forgot one thing. That is, from the lake to here, you are not allowed to dig a canal on the ground. Moreover, you have to bring a separate canal to the academy's dormitory area. The time limit is still 10 days. If you can complete the test, I'll give each of you a composite bow. No, I can't do it. This is not something a human can do. Li Chengqian and Du Go could not help but complain. Li Shimin coughed and said with a cold voice, These are the things you learned in the mountains during this period of time? This is also my test. If you can complete what Fengzi said within 10 days, get lost along Yu Road. Chapter 14:23. Li Shimin didn't understand what Zhang Feng was going to do at first. Sometimes it was to draw water to the workshop. Sometimes it was to ask them about aerodynamics, hydrodynamics, and so on. Although he didn't understand these things, he always felt that it seemed to be something very awesome. And Li Shimin was quite satisfied with Li Chengqian's answer just now. This was his son. This was what the crown prince of the Tang dynasty should have. But when Zhang Feng asked them to take action, they were stumped. What was the difference between this and an embroidered pillow? This was what made Li Shimin angry the most. As long as you guys put in a little more effort, how is this thing difficult? How is it difficult? You understood the things in the book, but you still didn't know how to tinker with that thing. What was the difference between this and an armchair strategist? After all this time, this finally happened. How could Li Shimin not be angry? Chen Yaojin and the others also looked at Li Chengqian with smiles, but when they saw Li Shimin looking over, they hurriedly put on a straight face and said in a serious voice, "This is a good thing. Although I don't know what this thing is, once it is made, it will definitely be a good thing that will leave a mark in history. Think about it, since ancient times, who can make water flow from a low place to a high place? So, just now I was thinking that since Fengzi asked you to do it, you must have a certain degree of confidence. Didn't you just say that this thing doesn't seem to be difficult for you? Don't make your father uncomfortable. The sooner you make this thing, the sooner the phosphate fertilizer factory can start working. This is all money." Yes, old Hay is right. Qian. Do you still remember what you said to me when you came to Fengzi? Li Shimin also gave advice. In an instant, Du Ruhui, Wei Zhang, and the others also gave advice to Li Chengqian and Li Chengqian. Their meaning was clear. They had to do this thing whether they wanted to or not. Moreover, from the few words spoken by these people, the meaning that flowed out was already very clear. At a time like this thing is a lifesaver. Once it's produced, it will benefit everyone. In any case, the entire Great Tang will be yours. If you create this wonderful thing that benefits both the country and the people, your prestige in the court will soar. Once you ascend to the throne in the future, you'll be able to do so. That would be a lot of benefits. Anyway, to put it bluntly, even if you want to go, you still have to go. Everyone said so, and Zhang Feng, who deserved a beating, didn't say anything. He just looked at them with a smile. What could he say? Li Chengqian could only cup his fists and clench his teeth as he said, "Then, this student will go and prepare now." As they spoke, Li Chengqian and Du Go hurriedly slipped away. If they stayed any longer, they would be driven mad. Although they also knew that this thing was definitely related to the phosphate mine on Longzhou Mountain, how could such a thing be produced? Wasn't this a fantasy? Once they went out, the two of them looked listlessly at the lake under the waterfall in the distance, and couldn't help but sigh again. "De Bing, do you think this thing is King Fengzi, that bastard tricking us?" Du Go looked behind him. After seeing that there was no one, he said bitterly, "I suspect that this is a trap set by them. How could they do this?" "I have something to say." At this time, a timid voice sounded weakly behind them. The two of them were so scared that they trembled. Turning his head to look, he saw the kid that Zhang Feng brought back squatting at the corner of the wall, weaving straw sandals. Beside him was a fat goat licking his straw sandals. Moreover, it had even bitten a hole in it. This person was Chen Wanli's silly younger brother. He was picked up by Zhang Feng. He was very quiet, as if he didn't exist. At this time, seeing him speak, Li Chengqian waved his hand impatiently, and didn't intend to pay attention to him. At this time, Chen Xianger said, "Actually, water can flow upwards. I remember that on the Longzhou Canal in Chang'an City, there's a big water wheel. What do you know? What does that thing have to do with this?" Li Chengqian's voice couldn't be lowered. He was already upset. Previously, when Zhang Feng arranged that kind of training, he was already unhappy. He also wanted to go. But Zhang Feng arranged for him to do this troublesome experiment. All he had to do was deal with these bottles and cans. How could it be as cool as brandishing a knife and wielding a gun? And the conversation between Li Chengqian and Chen Xianger was clearly heard by the few people in the living room. At this time, seeing Li Chengqian speak, Zhang Feng was a little surprised by Chen Xianger's behavior, but he still couldn't help but walk out of the room. He squatted beside Chen Xianger and asked, "How did you know?" "I heard about it. And I also heard that there are marines. When people were in Tongzhou, they saw this thing in the farmland. When you mentioned it just now, I guessed it." Zhang Feng patted Chen Xianger's shoulder, then looked at the listless Li Chengqian and Qian Wanli. He said with a smile, "Li Chengqian, I order you now as the dean. In these 10 days, listen to Chen Xianger's opinion on everything related to this thing. And from now on, he's your brother. Within a month, teach him how to read and teach him the basic knowledge related to physics. Once you do that, I'll agree to one of your requests." Also, Zhang Feng smiled and said, "Chen Xianger has already told you the answer. That's right, the thing I'm talking about is actually linked to the water wheel. Think about it carefully. 10 days is plenty of time." Li Chengqian smacked his lips. He looked at Chen Xianger, then looked at Zhang Feng who had entered the room. He suddenly felt like crying. Chapter 14:24. Li Chengqian wanted to cry. Looking at Chen Xiang, who was squatting in the corner, he felt like he was in Tesco. "I am the crown prince, okay? I am Li Chengqian, the current crown prince. You want me to learn from a fool? Learn what?" Sigh. Li Chengqian slapped his eyes, took a deep breath, and waved his hand. "Da-bingo. Invite your junior brother back to our villa." After Li Chengqian and the other two left. In the room, Wei Zhang and the others looked at Zhang Feng strangely. Then they looked at Li Shimin, who looked a little unhappy, and did not dare to say anything. Let the current crown prince communicate with a fool. This is probably the first time in history that such a weirdo has happened, right? Even storytellers would not dare to say this. Li Shimin was a little embarrassed. Looking at Zhang Feng, who was in a daze while making the customized map, he asked, "Fengzi, I know that you have been a little upset recently because of that Qian Wanli, but you don't have to push his younger brother away like this, right? If you think it's okay, I'll go find someone and let him live a rich life. How about that?" Zhang Feng looked at Li Shimin and said with a faint smile, "If you don't want your family to fall, then you can choose this. Do you think that I, Zhang Feng, am blind? That I can bring anyone to the mountain?" Li Shimin and the other dukes' faces suddenly changed. Zhang Feng's words were simply disrespectful. Li Shimin asked, "What do you mean by this?" Zhang Feng put the map into his pocket. It was obvious that he had no intention of returning it to Li Shimin. He said, "Qian Xiang, I have a feeling that in less than 10 years, the entire Tang dynasty, at least in the business world, will not be able to stand shoulder to shoulder with him. What's the point of having a family name? When that time comes, we won't even be able to see his back. That's why I brought him up the mountain. Li Gan and the others aren't interested in the business world, so it's understandable that you want Li Gan to take over your legacy. But have you ever thought that you're handing over such a big business to someone they don't like? Even if I'm there to support it in the future, what if I go somewhere else when the time comes? What will happen to him?" Li Shimin's eyes narrowed. He looked at the door and asked, "So you're saying that this kid is a prodigy in the business world?" Zhang Feng nodded his head. "Unique." Li Shimin was shocked. This was the first time he had received such praise from Zhang Feng. He had indeed seen Zhang Feng praise people before, but he had never seen Zhang Feng praise a person as a unique existence. Even Qian Wanli had not received such high praise. When he thought of Chen Xianger's silly look, Li Shimin could not help but go crazy. How could such a person be considered a business genius? That was simply the injustice of the heavens. Zhang Feng also saw the confusion on Li Shimin and the others' faces. He smiled and said, "Don't be fooled by his appearance. Although this kid looks a little foolish, this kind of person is the most terrifying. Previously, when I was in the Chen family, I also inadvertently discovered his talent in business. Perhaps this is the reason why people who don't walk the same path will not enter the same house? This kid wasn't born properly. He's an illegitimate child. However, he learned from his mother that his father is a businessman. If he wants to return home, he must be recognized. Moreover, his mother's life is actually quite miserable. Moreover, this kid was born with some brain problems in the eyes of others. So naturally, he would be forgotten by the Chen family. In addition, this kid was stimulated by the death of his mother in his early years. This is even more incredible. But as the saying goes, when God closes a door for you, he will open a window for you. This kid is like this. Although he is a little silly, but in the business world, it can be said that you, Lao Li, will be hung up and beaten if you were to ask him now." Although Li Shimin was not a real businessman, he also planned to firmly grasp the business power in his hands. Was this kid really as terrifying as Zhang Feng said? If this was the case, there was one thing that Zhang Feng did not say, but everyone understood. That was this kid was a little silly. This was the easiest to control. Once he recognized a person, it was almost impossible for a second person to walk into his heart in this lifetime. This was also a point that Li Shimin slightly realized after studying Zhang Feng's psychological book and adding this time. At this time, Li Shimin was really looking forward to it. After 10 days, would it give him a surprise? If so, then in the future. Chapter 1425. Li Chengqian and Du Go spent a lot of effort to convince Qian Guang'er and invite him into the villa. This kid was stubborn. Other than Zhang Feng, he didn't believe anyone else. However, Zhang Feng had given them a strict order. They had no choice but to invite Qian Guang'er into the villa as if he was their ancestor. Inside the villa, Cheng Chimo and the others were really excitedly discussing the training this time. They were even shirtless. The entire living room was foggy, mixed with the smell of sweat. That feeling. It felt good. However, when they saw Li Chengqian and Du Go bring Qian Guang'er in with a gloomy face, they couldn't help but instantly quiet down. Cheng Chimo also hurriedly put on his clothes and asked, "I say, didn't you guys go to see Fengzi? What's the situation?" Du Go pointed at Qian Guang'er and said, "Do you still remember the time when Fengzi asked us to get water for the workshop?" Who didn't remember this? Everyone remembered? However, it had been a long time and they had forgotten. Now that Du Go said this, they suddenly remembered. Cheng Chimo widened his eyes in surprise and asked, "What? Fengzi, do you still remember this?" Du Go looked at Li Chengqian's gloomy face and hurriedly called the timid Qian Guang'er to the side. He let him sit in the corner and eat snacks. Then he said, "Yes. However, this time, he asked us to connect all the water in the villa area and the school dormitory area from the lake." When Cheng Chimo heard this, he didn't have much reaction. He nodded and said, "This is very simple. Tomorrow, I'll find a few people to dig a canal. Isn't that enough? You're so worried just because of this?" Simple? Du Go was speechless as he stared at Cheng Chimo. Cheng Chimo sniffed and said, "Isn't that simple? If it's so simple, would he still be Fengzi?" Li Chengqian sighed and said, "What he means is that we're not allowed to dig enough canals. Within 10 days, we have to connect the water in the lake to the second-floor balconies of all the villas. Then, we have to go around the dormitory area and return to the lake." Hearing this, in an instant, everyone exploded. Bad day? Crazy. F***CK. Instantly, Cheng Chimo and the others were dumbfounded. Mother***Ker, are they crazy? How could he possibly succeed in this matter? Wasn't this intentional? Wei Shuyu pointed at the string of money and said, "Then what does this kid do?" Du Go sighed and said, "When we went out, this kid said something about using the water wheel. Fengzi came out and told us to bring him along." Water wheel? In an instant, everyone was stunned. They had seen a lot of water wheels. And he thought of many things in an instant. But at this time, using the principle of the water wheel to bring water to the villa? Or the second floor? Everyone couldn't help but glance at the top floor of the villa. It should be at least 10 feet tall, right? Although the lake was higher than the villa, the height of the villa, how could the water be directed to the second floor of the villa? And on the second floor of all the villas? A water wheel was indeed possible, but how big would it have to be to do that? This was simply impossible to accomplish. They couldn't help but look at Chen Xiang, who was hiding aside and eating snacks while secretly sizing them up. Wei Shuyu slowly walked forward, squatted beside Chen Xiang, and asked, "Just now you said that it can be done with a water wheel?" Chen Xiang instinctively shrank back, glanced at Wei Shuyu, and then looked at Cheng Chimo in fear, and stammered timidly, "Well, it can be done, and it only needs 2 water wheels and some water troughs." Water troughs? 2 water wheels? Could this work? In an instant, Li Chengqian's face changed. So did everyone else. They really learned a lot of basic physics knowledge such as aerodynamics and hydrodynamics, and they knew many of them like the back of their hand. The most important thing was that they all knew about water wheels. They all had such things in their houses. But at this time, thinking of this, in an instant, everyone was suddenly enlightened. Li Chengqian looked at Qian Xiang in shock and asked, "Xiang, tell me honestly, Fengzi told you all this in advance, right?" Qian Xiang was trembling from Li Chengqian's expression and aura at this time. She shivered behind the chair and said, I didn't. Brother didn't tell me. This is all my guess. Don't blame brother. Buzz. Li Chengqian's head exploded. At this time, thinking of what Zhang Feng said at the door and his expression when he said it, and then looking at what Qian Xiang said now, Li Chengqian had an illusion that he had lived for nothing. Obviously. He was the one who studied the hardest. But in the end, why couldn't he think of such a simple thing? In the end, it was a little kid who didn't know anything to explain to him? And this kid had some problems with his head. Li Chengqian's face was a little ugly. He looked up, but saw Wei Shuyu, Du Go and the others' constipated expressions. He couldn't help but take a deep breath. Dabing, tell me, we've been on the mountain for so long. Why do I seriously suspect that we've just arrived? Chapter 14:26. Actually. Not to mention Li Chengqian and Du Go, although everyone had just seen a little bit of Qian Xianer, they could feel how terrifying he was. This guy. He was simply a pervert. If it was before, Li Chengqian, Du Go, and everyone else really thought that this was an impossible task. But now, with this kid's words, everyone instantly felt that there was a slight possibility this time. It could be done. 2 water wheels, plus a series of water troughs, using the principles of water circulation and dynamics, this could really be done. And they thought of more than one problem. But the problem was, filling the mountain with water at this time, this seemed. Cheng Chumo looked at the door cautiously and said, Li Qingqian, is there a problem here, Fengzi? As he spoke, Cheng Chumo pointed at his head and whispered again, if there's no problem, what kind of water are they filling the mountain with at this time? And most importantly, isn't it a little superfluous to do this at this time? Li Chengqian rolled his eyes and said, you don't know this, but the phosphate fertilizer factory on Mount Longsho has no water source. I reckon we'll have to make a trip to Mount Longsho when the time comes. This water trough, to put it bluntly, is a test. If we can complete it this time, then there's no problem. If we can't, haha, not to mention Fengzi, even my father will skin us alive. Speaking of this, everyone was even more worried. Especially Cheng Chumo. Although he seemed very excited, from Yuchi Baolin's words just now, he vaguely felt that this perverted military training seemed to make him a little apprehensive. This thing was still the simplest, but that bastard Zhang Feng actually said that this was still the simplest, that they still had to train their resistance to beatings, endurance and so on. At first, everyone thought that this was a joke. But now, after Li Chengqian confirmed the water trough, Cheng Chumo instantly felt that the end had come. What the hell? This was not something that humans could do. Resistance, hunger tolerance, reflexes. From their point of view, wasn't this just taking a beating without fighting back? Furthermore, after taking a beating, he wouldn't be able to eat and would continue on like this? Thinking of this, Cheng Chumo couldn't help but want to hug Wei Shuyu and cry for a while. But Wei Shuyu slapped him to Du Go's side. Li Chengqian ignored the grumbling Cheng Chumo and said enviously, why don't we switch? Hearing this, Cheng Chumo was instantly energized. He asked excitedly, are you serious? Li Chengqian nodded. I'm serious. Seeing this, Cheng Chumo immediately shook his head like a rattledrum and said, then I won't trade. Li Chengqian was so angry that he wanted to beat someone up. Damn you, are you looking for a beating? Seeing this, Feng Yai hurriedly tried to smooth things over. Now is not the time to talk about this. Let's think about what to do next. I just heard that Fengzi plans to use Li Chengqian's stubborn identity in Chang'an as well as the identity of those hooligans to stir up trouble. Why do I feel that Fengzi seems to want to do something big? Hearing this, only then did everyone's expression change. Every one of them basically had some lackeys in Chang'an. These people had nothing to do. They usually did whatever they wanted to do. However, almost every month, they had to take money to bribe them. The purpose was to find out some secrets for them. At first, it was to help them find some fun and interesting things, such as something good coming out of Yanlai restaurant today, or Dongying people coming to Chang'an Shi City, or barbarians peddling women in revealing clothes and so on. These were all the initial models. After the identities of the 4 great demon kings were confirmed, the stubborn world was also officially confirmed. At this time, the intelligence network of Li Chengqian and the others was basically completed. Li Chengqian knew that it was impossible for Li Shimin not to know about his stubborn identity in Chang'an City. The reason why he didn't say it was actually intentional. He also needed some information, and the identities of the 4 great demon kings seemed to be confusing. At least it could give those who knew them the illusion that the emperor didn't know about it, and the dukes were indulging in it. In this way, their careful thoughts would be active. And this was their best person to gather information. However, they didn't know how Zhang Feng knew about it. Could it be that he found clues from the matter of paper and the bone-strengthening powder? But it didn't matter. The most important thing at this time was, when would they be able to have a real fight? They couldn't wait to directly rush into the homes of the 5 families and 7 clans and directly wipe them out. Wouldn't it be better? Why did they have to talk in circles here? Li Chengqian nodded and said, just now at Fengzi's place, I heard Fengzi's conversation with father and the others. It seems that Fengzi is indeed going to do something big. The most important thing is our bomb. Once we find out who is behind it, we will use the bomb I made to kill them. It's that simple. Chapter 14:27. Actually, Li Chengqian did not know the specific content of the task. The best explanation was that, at this time, everything was prepared for the sake of uncovering the pair of hands hidden behind the shadows. Zhang Feng wanted to find out the big hands. Last night at Yan Lai restaurant, Cheng Chimo and the others faintly sensed that something was wrong. The main problem was that Feng Zi made a big fuss in Chang'an yesterday, but those people still did not make a move. Not to mention others. Even the big clans behind the Bai, Mi, Tang, and others did not intend to stand up. What did this mean? They did not understand. But after thinking about it on the way back, they found the key to the problem. It seemed that these people were deliberately hiding something. Or perhaps, they did not know this at all. This was the most confusing. Let's not talk about you and them. Those big clans must have relatives, right? But such a big thing had happened. Why did those relatives and collateral relatives of these big clans not stand up? What did this mean? Not only did they not understand, but now that Li Shimin said this, Zhang Feng also did not understand. Rubbing his temples, he waved his hand and said, in fact, there is nothing to say. The hounds are already cooked. It is already a blessing that these people did not add insult to injury. What a joke. The emperor has already given the order. Unless they are stupid, otherwise, who would dare to stand up and do such a thing at this time? Li Shimin thought for a while and said, what you said makes some sense. But this matter, we still can't let down our guard. If these people do something behind our backs, then... Zhang Feng interrupted Li Shimin and said, this is the so-called human nature. Don't worry, within these 10 days, they will be very honest. Don't ask, these people are waiting for things to calm down. After things calm down, they will erupt after suppressing themselves. And we are waiting for this eruption. Before they erupt, I believe that our men and those gossipy women, as well as the informants of the local ruffians, have already been arranged. At that time, I will also let the people of the Enlufang and the Tonghuifang move around. At that time, it will be time to track down the mastermind behind the scenes. And I have a feeling that this time, we may have caught a big fish. Li Shimin was shocked and waved his hand subconsciously. Seeing this, Niu Jinda knew that he could not avoid it. He slowly stood up and leaned against the door, carefully listening to the movements outside the door. After seeing Niu Jinda shake his head, Li Shimin asked solemnly, Fengzi, tell me honestly, do you have someone you suspect? Zhang Feng nodded and said, yes. My intuition tells me that everything that's been going on these days has nothing to do with the 5 surnames and 7 clans, as well as the nobles of Shandong. Li Shimin was shocked. On the surface, White Deer College and Chang'an University were basically the Crown Prince's trial grounds. All of this was supported by the imperial edict. Looking at history, such a thing had never happened before. However, White Deer College had been extremely ostentatious from the start. From the 4 great scholars' ascension to the mountain, to Sun Si Miao's anger, to the porridge, pork, bone-strengthening powder and so on, it had always been an ostentatious path. From the start, their intuition told them that all these were the deliberate actions of the people from the 5 great families. But, now that Zhang Feng said this, they finally had a trace of consciousness. These 3 aristocratic families did not see eye to eye with each other. They restrained each other, forming a tripartite balance of power. Because of Yang Guang's deliberate actions, the Guanlong group's influence in the imperial court had been greatly damaged. What was left was basically useless. Although the 5 great families were better off, they were no longer as glorious as they were in the Sui dynasty. However, their deterrence was still there. The people from the Guanlong group had embarked on the path of merchants. They operated their own forces in the Northern Army and shifted their focus from the imperial court to the Northern Army and the path of merchants. Although these 5 families and 7 clans had their own camps at this time, and although on the surface they seemed to be united, Li Shimin discovered that from the nobles that were recruited every year, there weren't many people from these 5 families and 7 clans. The reason was that the Directorate and the Hongwen Hall were basically suppressed by Guanlong's people. And Li Shimin was also eager for them to have such a situation. Next would be the people from the Shandong aristocratic families. These people disdained to enter the imperial court as officials, so they rarely came to the imperial court. However, there were still some representatives. Kong Yingda was the most important one. What he disdained the most was to associate with these merchants. Therefore, he was the one who restrained the Guanlong group and the 5 great families and 7 great families. But this time's matter, Li Shimin's first instinct was that this was a conspiracy. It was a conspiracy that deliberately targeted the Shandong aristocratic families. Otherwise, why would they use him to get rid of Kong Yingda, the only high-ranking person in Shandong? At the beginning, Kong Yingda had always been indifferent to these things. However, why did he jump out at such a critical moment? Why did he jump out? In addition, the group of hoodlums in the Shao Mountain Market had been shouting that they were sent here by Kong Yingda. However, how could a discerning person not see that this Motherf Kerr was not Kong Yingda's doing? Wasn't this disgusting? This was simply disgusting. However, although he was the emperor, he could not ignore it. He could only drag Kong Yingda into the prison. All of this was too logical. It was like directly opening a pocket for Kong Yingda and waiting for him to enter. Li Shimin thought of this and his expression suddenly changed. He said, "Fengzi, you mean?" Kong Yingda was framed by someone. Someone wants to provoke the conflict between the Shandong aristocratic families and the 5 great families and 7 great families? Chapter 1428. Zhang Feng nodded and said, "You also thought of it? In fact, I've known for a long time that the academy was just being used by others. But they should never have killed Qian Wanli. This is not only aimed at the Shandong gentry and the 5 families and 7 families. Don't you realize that these people just want to put the blame on me? And what they want is, Laoli, what you just thought. Once we all have such thoughts, then, we've really been fooled." Li Shimin's face changed again. This time, a fine layer of cold sweat involuntarily appeared on his forehead. Who on earth could have such a terrible plan? Was he even human? He wanted to stir up the chaos of the entire Tang dynasty. Li Shimin hurriedly asked, "When did you realize it?" Zhang Feng lit a cigarette and handed it to Li Shimin. Then he looked at Wei Zhang and the others and said, "In fact, after seeing Qian Wanli's body and hearing their words, I understood." "Yes. That is to say, the killing you caused in Chang'an City was also a test?" Wei Zhang frowned and asked. Zhang Feng nodded. "In fact, it was not a test. After killing my brother, do you think you can get away with it so easily? That's impossible. In fact, it was also a test for me. To put it bluntly, it was also a means to lure Lao Li out." While speaking, Zhang Feng looked at Li Shimin playfully and said, "Lao Li, I really didn't expect that the mysterious person would pay such a high price to test you. What is your identity on Earth?" Li Shimin looked shocked. "Is he suspecting me? Ahem, let's not talk about this first. Let's talk about your guess first." Li Shimin hurriedly changed the topic. Seeing this, Zhang Feng shook his head speechlessly and said, "This time if you think about it carefully, you will be able to see many clues. This time if I don't do anything, or if you don't do anything, the probing yesterday will be endless. They will keep probing until they find a satisfactory answer." When Li Shimin heard this, although he had already expected this, at this moment, when he thought about what Zhang Feng had just said, a chill ran down his spine. "Go on." Zhang Feng looked at the cigarette in his hand, and a strong killing intent flashed in his eyes. "Actually, to put it bluntly, this is a trap prepared for us early on. We've been too ostentatious all this time. Our unconventional teaching model has attracted the hatred of Shandong. Then, our new business model, paperblank, and so on have caused direct economic conflicts with Guanlong, behind the road, the papermaking workshop, the forging workshop, and so on have attracted the attention of the 5 families and 7 clans. All these, it seems like we are doing what we want to do unconsciously, but You should have guessed that this is where those people left a target, and also an opportunity for them to add fuel to the fire. At this point, Zhang Feng's expression gradually turned solemn as he said, "Now, all of you should know, right? In fact, our direction is wrong. This time, based on my intuition, doesn't seem to be the doing of these big clans. If Shandong really wanted to target us, would they need to resort to such petty means? Also, the 5 families and 7 clans, do you think we are worthy of them paying such a high price to target us? They only need to move a finger, and everything we've created now will be finished." Li Shimin said with a hint of surprise. "You're saying that all this is not their doing? Then, what's the matter with Chong and 8 Waters? Also, everything that happened in Nantian wasn't caused by them?" This was what Li Shimin couldn't figure out the most. From the siege of Chang'an's economy last time, to Nantian, to the iron mine this time, could it be that these big clans were not the ones who did it? Then who could have done it? Feng Xianling was also very surprised and said, "Fengzi, this matter, are you?" Zhang Feng spread out his hands and said, "That's what you asked me to guess. Now I'm just talking about my opinion. Forget it, I won't say it. In short, I don't think it's the doing of these big clans. Instead, I think it's done by someone who knows the situation of the Tang Empire very well and knows about the war on the border. At the same time, someone who has a good relationship with these big clans did it. Or, it's done by those outsiders. I really can't think of any other possibility." Zhang Feng said so. Seeing that Zhang Feng didn't want to talk about it, Feng Xianling hurriedly said, "Fengzi, do you think that those big clans are not suspicious at all? Or, did they choose to believe the person you spoke of and just sit back and watch? This seems to be. But the person you said, I think except for the emperor and the retired emperor, no one else can do it, right?" Li Shimin couldn't help but nod. He also thought it was impossible. How big a plan was it? And most importantly, what did he want to do with such a big plan? As for the outsiders, Li Shimin was the first to be excluded. It was simply impossible. Those big clans even hated these outsiders more than he did. In their eyes, these outsiders were no different from the indigenous barbarians. Under such conditions, how could they believe the outsiders? Chapter 1429. However, Zhang Feng didn't think so. After all, everyone had their own weaknesses and weaknesses. For example, if Zhang Feng wanted to stir up trouble, or if he was the one doing this, he would definitely do it 100 times better than what he was doing now. Moreover, he wouldn't leave any clues behind. This was Zhang Feng's confidence. It was also because of this that Zhang Feng realized that this matter didn't seem to be simple at all. Li Shimin rubbed his head and said with a headache, "Fengzi, just say it directly. Whether this matter has anything to do with these big clans, or whether these big clans are involved, this is a direction. If we can confirm it, we can narrow down the scope. In this way we will have a direction to target. We won't be like a headless fly, right?" Zhang Feng spread his hands and said, "You ask me, but who should I ask?" Before Li Shimin was about to get angry, Zhang Feng hurriedly said, "In fact, these people must know something about this matter. At least the upper level of these big clans must know. Otherwise, it would be strange if these big clans didn't react last night. Doesn't the Wang clan's iron ore prove anything?" Wei Zheng frowned and said, "Yes. This shows that the Wang clan is anxious to clear their name." Hearing Zhang Feng's words, everyone became more confused. Li Shimin asked, "What do you mean?" Zhang Feng said with a smile, "In fact, it's very simple. I went to the Gao clan, Mi clan, and Bai clan. These 3 clans said that the Wang clan's people and the Tang clan's people went to find them together. If the Wang clan really did do it, they wouldn't be in such a hurry to react and open the ironware shop. This is the most unreasonable thing. If the Wang clan was really involved in this matter, these people would have been killed before I went. How could they wait for me to go?" After Zhang Feng said so, in an instant, Li Shimin thought everything through and understood everything. Why did these people insist that it was done by the Wang clan and the Tang clan together? Why did the Wang clan's people leave evidence that could be used against them? It was as if they wanted the whole world to know that they were the ones who did it. This was the strangest part of it all. Now that Zhang Feng had said so, Li Shimin instantly understood all the confusion. "Fengzi, then what do you think?" "Say no more." Zhang Feng waved his hand and said, "If you want to find a breakthrough in this matter, I think that Wang clan is the best breakthrough." Instantly, the entire living room was so quiet that one could hear a pin drop. Wang clan. Was Zhang Feng trying to target the Wang clan? Seeing everyone's expression at this time, Zhang Feng was speechless and said, "What's with your expressions?" Feng Xianling glanced at Li Shimin and said, "Feng Zi, do you know that this is the most sensitive time for the Wang clan? If what you said is true, once we really target the Wang clan, the person behind the scenes will definitely add fuel to the fire. In this way, it will be even more impossible for us to find out the truth. And we will directly face the crazy revenge of the 5 families and 7 clans." At this time, Li Shimin really didn't want to directly face the people of the 5 families and 7 clans so early. This was not the right time. And if he forced the people of the Wang clan into a corner, then the result would be. At the thought of this, Li Shimin couldn't help but shudder and said, "Feng Zi, you. Listen to me first." Zhang Feng waved his hand and said, "In fact, targeting the Wang clan is only in the message. Who the hell told them to stop the iron mine for Lao Tzu? Who the hell told the Tang family to keep saying that it has something to do with the Wang clan? Who the hell told the Tang family to keep saying that it has something to do with the Wang clan? All these were ordered by the Wang clan? This is the reason for us to bombard the Wang clan. Once we do something to him, regardless of anything else, I believe that the people of the Wang clan will definitely not sit still. They will definitely stand up and take the initiative to contact the mysterious person. What we need to do is to take revenge for Qian Wanli and seek justice for the students of the world. We just need to keep our eyes on the Wang clan's every move and wait for them to lead that person out." Li Shimin was stunned. "That's it?" Zhang Feng said doubtfully. "How complicated do you think it is? You asked me to find a direction to investigate. But we can't just leave one person to die, right? What if the people of the Wang clan are forced into a corner and turn against us? What should we do?" Li Shimin's words were not without reason. At this time, if the people of the Wang clan were angered, how could White Deer College withstand his wrath? Zhang Feng said with a smile, "Just wait and see. His Majesty definitely won't let this go. Even if he does, our White Deer College has an imperial edict. Moreover, before this matter, we will get the phosphate fertilizer out. As long as the Wang clan isn't a fool, they won't dare to do anything to our White Deer College. You have to know that at this time, whoever has more land and more phosphate fertilizer will obtain more benefits in the upcoming big reshuffle. So, why do you think the people of the Wang clan would open a blacksmith shop at this time? Because they have also sensed the crux of the problem. They are also using this method to send us a message." Li Shimin looked at Wei Zhang and the others in confusion. He saw that they were all dumbfounded. He then asked, "Feng Zi, what message are they sending?" Chapter 1430. They really didn't know what these people were thinking. Moreover, they used such a method to send a message. Even if they really wanted to send a message, couldn't they just send someone to say it? Why did they have to be so secretive? Wei Zhang thought for a while and seemed to have thought of something. However, seeing that Li Shimin didn't speak, he could only endure it. Wei Zhang couldn't help but remind Li Shimin, "Second brother, I thought of something. Can you help me see if I'm right?" Li Shimin was worried that he couldn't think of anything. At this time, seeing Wei Zhang acting like this, his expression changed and he said, "Actually, I did think of something, but it's also because I'm not sure. Tell me about it first." Hearing this, Chang Yaojin and the others' mouths twitched. But there was no other way. Wei Zhang's expression also froze when he saw this. He quickly restrained his expression and said, "Second master, think about it. Previously, they secretly closed the shop, which must have attracted Feng Zi's attention. At this time, if they want to open up, they need an opportunity. This opportunity is phosphate fertilizer. They also want to get it. But because of their pride, they had to think of a solution. At this time, someone found them and told them about the Tang family. So, the Wang family wanted to cooperate with them. Regardless of whether they win or lose, they won't lose anything. They also want to see where Zhang Feng's bottom line is, but they didn't expect to lose. At this time, what should they do? If it's you, old Chen, can you put down your pride?" Chang Yaojin didn't expect Wei Zhang to talk about him, but at this time, he pretended to be confused and acted as if he didn't hear anything. Then, Wei Zhang continued, "And this is also human nature. If they come, it will inevitably mean that they have lost. This will be very disadvantageous for everything in the future. Therefore they chose to use this method to tell Feng Zi that they have given in. For the people of the 5 families and 7 clans, this is something that hasn't happened for a long time. Second Master, Feng Zi, what do you think? What Wei Zhang said was extremely reasonable. Li Shimin wanted to clap his hands and cheer, but when he looked at Zhang Feng and the others, he pondered for a moment and said, "What old Wei said is indeed reasonable. It's different from what I thought. Feng Zi, what do you think of this?" Zhang Feng nodded and said, "Actually, this is the truth. They also know that our people are looking for an iron mine on Longsho Mountain. Although there's no news yet, they definitely know about the Nantian coal mine. In other words, they've basically lost this time. And this time, their admission of defeat is also a wise move. Think about it, when our iron ore comes out, who will they sell it to? Do you think he'll be able to take it if we push the price to the limit? In less than a year, no one will want their iron. So at this time, moreover, from the time they open the shop this time, this is also premeditated. That is, they want to reach a cooperation with us, but at this time they are still watching. Their intention is very straightforward. They want to equally divide the sales of Chang'an's ironware and the steel I make. You wait and see. If there's no accident, the price of their ironware this time will definitely be lower than ever before. Li Shimin said in an uproar, "You've calculated all of this. This is a business matter. Lao Li, don't tell me you don't know this." Zhang Feng looked at Li Shimin with some suspicion and said, "This can be regarded as the lowest level of strategy. Can't you understand this? So you just wait and see. We don't need to do anything now. We just need to watch them fight. In addition, since the Wang clan has taken the initiative, we should also take the initiative." "Yes." Li Shimin heard this and asked, "Take the initiative to what?" Zhang Feng wanted to touch Li Shimin's forehead, but Li Shimin avoided it. This made Zhang Feng speechless again and said, "I just want to see if you are confused. Such a simple thing. Can't you think of it? This is our rumor attack. Once we do this, it will inevitably force the Wang clan to find the mysterious person. We just need to follow him." At this time, Li Shimin suddenly understood. They finally knew all of Zhang Feng's arrangements. Before, no one had a clue. Now that Zhang Feng said it so clearly, if they still couldn't think of it, then there was really a problem. Zhang Feng was also annoyed. Being manipulated by this kind of thing, no one would be in a good mood. Moreover, he was so disgusted by it. Anyway, Zhang Feng had already explained the matter today. Whether Lao Li and the others investigated or not, Zhang Feng was going to find the mastermind behind the scenes. This thing was like a thorn stuck in his throat. In any case, it was uncomfortable. Zhang Feng put out the cigarette butt in his hand, got up and stretched his body, and said, "Okay, this matter is like this. If you want to catch these guys in one net, you can't be too hasty. Otherwise, it will be easy to alert the enemy. This matter, don't talk nonsense after drinking. Don't talk about it. It's going to give me a headache. I'm going to sleep." Chapter 1431. It rained during the autumn planting season. Once the frost was over, the weather also gradually became less hot. On the contrary, the cool air in the mountains at night made people feel comfortable. Especially in the afternoon, when the drizzling rain started again. The entire academy basically maintained its original appearance. Other than the place where the houses were built, it was basically a puddle of mud and an endless stretch of withered yellow grass. At this time, the grass was trampled by people, and it was not as majestic as it was in summer. Instead, it shrank in the mud and shivered. Today in the villa, Zhang Feng was so sleepy that he kept yawning. Jing Shu and Zhang Yuyao also developed the habit of taking a nap with Zhang Feng. Although it was already past noon, Zhang Feng still did not eat. Jing Shu and Zhang Yuyao sat at the table and looked at the terrible dishes they made. Waiting for Zhang Feng to come back, the two girls fell asleep on the table. Hearing the sound of the door, they woke up with a start. Seeing Zhang Feng come in, the two girls came up to him. Zhang Feng could not open his eyes at this time, but he was also hungry. Looking at the black plate of fried vegetables on the table, he asked in surprise, "Is this the cooking of Mr. He's wife?" We made it ourselves." Hearing this, Zhang Feng saw the two girls were shy, so he did not say anything. He picked up the bowl and ate in a daze. He did not care whether it was delicious or not. Anyway, he kept saying it was delicious against his conscience. The two girls were dumbfounded by his words. Seeing that Zhang Feng had left, the two women began to eat suspiciously. But the vegetables were burned. Not to mention, the salty vegetables were simply indescribable. After eating 2 mouthfuls of other dishes, the two girls gave up in frustration. Either there was no salt, or the bowl was full of salt that had not melted. Before Zhang Feng fell asleep, he saw Jing Shu come in with a bowl of tea with a bitter face. Seeing her, Zhang Feng complained, "How can you eat such terrible dishes?" Zhang Feng was also thirsty at this time. After drinking the tea, he said with a smile, "After all, it's your kindness. But you can't do this. Your body can't stand it." Seeing this, Zhang Feng laughed and hugged Jing Shu, saying, "If you want to cook in the future, I can teach you. But I still think it's a man's business. In the future, I can cook for you. Mr. He's wife is good at cooking." Hearing this, Jing Shu leaned in Zhang Feng's arms and whispered, "I know you're suffering. If there's anything, I'll help you." Zhang Feng gently pecked Jing Shu's face, played with her fingers, and said, "I'm not so weak. Don't cook in the future, or I won't hear that kind of zheng music in the future. By the way, what are you going to do about yesterday's matter?" Jing Shu was still a little worried about Zhang Feng and asked. Zhang Feng thought for a while, lying on the bed with Jing Shu in his arms, and said, "Actually, this matter is still a bit complicated. Someone wants to mess with me, but things are basically settled." "That's good. I won't disturb you. You have a good rest. I'll sleep for a while." Seeing this, Jing Shu was ready to leave. However, how could Zhang Feng let Jing Shu go? Just as Zhang Feng was taking a nap, Li Shimin was very anxious. He paced back and forth in the room. Wei Zhang and the others didn't even dare to breathe loudly. After a while, Li Shimin gritted his teeth and said, "Old Feng, I think we should put this matter aside. Fengzi is right. If we rush to make a move on Wang clan now, we'll only be in a passive position. By the way, old you, is there still no news from the people looking for the iron ore on Mount Longsho?" "There's news," Yu Qigong hurriedly said. "We just received news that iron ore has indeed been found in the Swallow Ridge area of Mount Longsho. However, those ores are all underground. If we open up the mine, we won't be able to meet the demand in a short period of time. At least not within this year." Li Shimin instantly understood when he heard this, but he frowned unhappily and said, "Why are you only saying this now?" Seeing this, Yu Qigong didn't dare to say anything. In fact, it didn't matter whether he said it now or not. Even if they didn't find it, so what? Now that Wang clan's ironware was sold at a low price, the iron on the market was basically in a stable state for the time being. The iron ship, the forge on the mountain, and the ironware bureau at the foot of the mountain could all resume production. In this way, as long as the steel on the mountain could be smelted fast enough, it could basically guarantee that 10,000 elite soldiers could get weapons. Coupled with the ballista and the strong crossbow, they would basically win the war. Now things in Chang'an City were also stabilizing, but the main factor was the phosphate fertilizer. Once the phosphate fertilizer was officially used in agriculture, the overall situation would be completely stabilized. In other words, now, only the phosphate fertilizer and the new weapons were left. As for the other things, it was not the time to make a move for the time being. Once the phosphate fertilizer and the new weapons appeared, almost all the problems would be solved. Thinking of this, Li Shimin couldn't sit still. He asked, "What time is it now?" "It's already past midnight." "How long has Fengzi been gone?" "Less than 2 hours." "What, less than 2 hours? Go wake him up. When he comes to the mountain, we have to see for ourselves how the phosphate fertilizer is made." Hearing this, everyone's expression changed instantly. They hurriedly comforted Li Shimin and said, "Second Master, you can't do this." Chapter 1432. Li Shimin was a little surprised. Why can't I go and take a look?" Wei Zheng's expression changed drastically when he saw this. He looked at little Gizi at the door. Seeing that there was nothing unusual, he said, "Second Master, that thing is poisonous. How can you go to such a place with your precious body?" Chang Yaojin and the others saw this and came forward to dissuade him. What a joke. Although Zhang Feng could resolve the toxicity of this thing, the torture it would cause was simply not something a human could endure. If the emperor went at this time, who would be responsible if something happened to that thing? Would it be because he didn't protect the emperor well enough? At this time, They had to pay more attention to some things. If they left a bad impression, it would cause a big problem. However, Li Shimin didn't listen. He took out a mask and said, "I knew you would say that. Look at what this is." Wei Zhang saw this and said, "Second master, look at old Niu, then look at Li Qian and the others when they were first poisoned. This is an eventful time. If something goes wrong, we can't afford to take responsibility. Second master, please take back your order." Several people hurriedly knelt in front of Li Shimin and shouted in unison. Although the possibility of poisoning had been dealt with, it was better to be safe than sorry. What if it was poisoned? Li Shimin put on the mask and said indifferently, "Since we're already here, if even I am afraid of this thing, how can we let the people eat it with peace of mind?" "Don't talk about it now. Since we're already here, don't you want to see how he made this thing? I believe that you've all heard your family's kid talk about this thing, right? Don't you want to see it? Don't you want to have this kind of colored glass for yourself?" As he spoke, Li Shimin pointed at the frosted glass on the window. This was the real good stuff, but Li Chengqian said that the glass in the test tube that Zhang Feng used for his experiments was of better quality. They even secretly brought it home. However, the one that Li Chengqian gave him was taken away by retired emperor. He didn't even have the time to play with it. On one hand, he really wanted to see the magical refining process. More importantly, he wanted to see the transparent thing that Zhang Feng called a glass bottle. It was said that the wine from the western region would taste even better in this kind of cup. Forget it, forget it. Let's not talk about this matter anymore. I've already made up my mind. There's no room for discussion. Li Shimin waved his sleeves and was about to walk out the door. Niu Jinda unwillingly blocked the door and said, "Second master, look at me. I was so uncomfortable at home before. For 7 whole days, you can't eat anything and can only drink vinegar. Have you ever thought of that feeling? That's the last thing I want to do. Please reconsider." Li Shimin was in a good mood. After finding out who was behind the scenes, he wanted to know how the phosphate fertilizer was made. Only when he saw it with his own eyes would he know what to do in the future. After all, seeing was believing. Even if he was poisoned, he could experience it for himself. It was worth it to know how to make such a magical thing that he had never seen before. This kind of opportunity was rare. However, how could Chang Yaojin and the others tolerate the emperor doing such a thing? If they were poisoned, it would be a serious crime to be beheaded. When they were in a deadlock, Li Shimin was also angry. He waved his sleeves and shouted, "Everyone, listen to my order." In an instant, everyone's voice stopped abruptly. They looked at Li Shimin with worry and surprise. Li Shimin waved his sleeves and said, "Now, I order you to record in detail the whole process of Feng Zi and the others' extraction of the experimental phosphate fertilizer. After we go back, I want to see your reports tomorrow morning. There must be no mistakes." When they heard this, their heads instantly drooped. Seeing this, Li Shimin said with a smile, "Isn't it just a visit? Do you have to be so worried? Besides, Feng Zi is still here. How can he watch us get poisoned? He will definitely give us the best protection. Don't worry." At other times, these people would always pester him, especially Wei Zhang. But once he gave the order, these people would be obedient instantly. This was Li Shimin's method that never failed. At this time, seeing that Li Shimin had made up his mind, what else could they say? They could only follow Li Shimin out of the villa. As soon as they came out of the villa, they saw Li Chengqian and the others gesturing around the villa area. They even quarreled from time to time. Seeing this, Li Shimin waved his hand. Li Chengqian and the others hurriedly stopped quarreling and ran over. "What are you doing?" Li Chengqian wiped the sweat on his face and said excitedly, "Father, we are designing the model of the water wheel. Basically, the preliminary plan of the water wheel has been thought out. You guys change first. I want to see the process of the phosphate fertilizer extraction. You go and wake Feng Zi up." Chapter 1433. What was going on? The emperor was going to watch them do the experiment? At this time, Cheng Chimo and others were shocked. They looked at each other in confusion, but no one dared to call Zhang Feng. They had seen the danger of the experiment with their own eyes. At this time, if the emperor was excited and wanted to do it himself, if there was another explosion, then the consequences would be unimaginable. Li Chengqian glanced at Wei Zhang and others suspiciously. They nodded and smiled bitterly, confirming Li Shimon's decision. Seeing this, Li Changqian was shocked and said, "Father, you can't do this. What if something happens to you? There are a lot of people watching you now. What if something happens to you? Father, please think twice." Li Shimon couldn't care so much. He waved his hand and said, "I've made up my mind. It can't be changed. Besides, aren't you here? Don't I even have the right to have a look? Or should I say, what kind of shady business are you up to?" Seeing that he couldn't persuade him, Li Changqian had to give up. He had to go to Zhang Feng resentfully. This thing was actually not that difficult. With the protection of the mask at this time, there shouldn't be too much trouble. While Li Changqian was thinking, he had already arrived at Zhang Feng's villa. Old Ma was still standing majestically at the door of Zhang Feng's villa, with his hand on the hilt, never leaving for a moment. The scar left on his face yesterday still looked so shocking at this time. But Old Ma didn't cry. This little injury was just a piece of cake for him. Seeing Li Changqian coming, Ma Xinliang nodded as a greeting. Looking at Li Shimon and others not far away, he hurriedly stopped Li Changqian. "Young Master Li, at this time, I advise you to wait. The dean may still be sleeping." Li Changqian didn't understand the meaning of Ma Xinliang's words. He nodded and turned to knock on the door. But after knocking for a long time, there was no response. Li Changqian couldn't help but be a little impatient. He roared loudly. After a while, Zhang Feng opened the door with sleepy eyes and asked impatiently, "What's the matter?" When Li Changqian saw this, he instantly seemed to understand something. He wanted to leave, but he couldn't. Feeling awkward, he clenched his teeth and said, "My father said he wants to see you do your experiment." Zhang Feng was a little confused. He asked, "What experiment?" "It's the phosphate fertilizer experiment." "I'm not free." Zhang Feng didn't even think about it and was about to close the door. Seeing this, Li Changqian panicked. "Fengzi, isn't it just an experiment? We can just do it." "My father said that he wants to see the production process of phosphate fertilizer so that he can calculate how much phosphate fertilizer we need now. When the time comes." Li Changqian explained a lot. The truth of the matter was finally revealed. The gist of it was that Li Shimon wanted to see if this thing could be planted this autumn. Not to mention the entire country, but at the very least, the entire imperial plantation, as well as the entire Guanyi Pass, would be able to produce some results. He also wanted to give the whole world a definite answer. Right now, there were many rumors about whether this phosphate fertilizer was real or fake. Although many people believed in Zhang Feng, they didn't believe that this thing was real. After all, this thing had never appeared before. At this moment, Zhang Feng's sleepiness was slightly alleviated. Li Changqian was right. Right now, things were a little complicated. There were many rumors in the market, so much so that no one knew who to believe. Moreover, this thing didn't belong to this era. It was normal to not believe it. And for everyone to accept this thing, how to put it, it was still a little difficult. The difficult part was whether this thing would be sold for money or free. If it was sold for money, who would buy it? If it wasn't sold for money, who would dare to use it? No one would dare to block their 1 year's worth of food. This put Zhang Feng in a difficult position. Seeing that Li Changqian's words seemed to make some sense, Zhang Feng said, "If that's the case, you go and prepare first. Call a few of them together. Also, invite Mr. Bo Shi and the others over. Also, call all the students of the academy over. Let's have a public experiment class." Seeing this, Li Changqian's expression froze. What is the meaning of this? If that's the case, wouldn't it be? Zhang Feng waved his hand and yawned. It's just letting them see an experiment. That little bit of measurement is actually nothing in an open space. Since they want to see it, then let them see it openly. There will only be more benefits in the future. Also, spread the word that this experiment will be held once on the mountain and once at the foot of the mountain. Anyone who wants to see it can come and see it. Hearing this, Li Changqian was shocked. This thing was originally not troublesome to experiment with. Could it be that Zhang Feng was planning to spread this thing out? These were shining silver tails. If someone else tinkered with it, let's not talk about whether it was profitable or not. Just this point alone, it was unknown whether they could be like them and not be poisoned. What if they were poisoned, what could they do? Chapter 1434. Zhang Feng's idea was actually very simple. Although this thing looked simple, How would it be done? Would they be able to do it? Moreover, the phosphate rock was poisonous. Although it was not really fatal, it was similar to methane poisoning. If you slept in the methane pool every day, it would be strange if you did not get poisoned. The most important thing was the ratio problem and the experimental equipment. Zhang Feng dared to guarantee. Apart from Algernon and him, if the others wanted to make such a thin and transparent test tube, then, if he could really make it, then no matter how far away he was, Zhang Feng would run over and ask for a prestige account. This was a fellow countryman. Without the experimental equipment, who would want to do this experiment? Don't even think about it. The reason why Zhang Feng wanted to do this was to give everyone an accurate answer and also to give a surprise to those who wanted to stir up trouble. Don't you want to stir up trouble? Fine. Then I'll let you do it. After Li Chengqian left, Zhang Feng's eyes lit up. He shouted to Old Ma. Old Ma. Director. Zhang Feng asked softly, do you have any land at home? Ma Xinliang's face stiffened. He said bitterly, no. Zhang Feng asked again, go quickly. Get Cripple Wang, the village chief, Old He, and Zhuzi's father here. I have something to discuss with them. Ma Xinliang was a little confused. He wanted to ask something, but seeing that Zhang Feng was unwilling to say, he was embarrassed to ask. He did not know what Zhang Feng wanted to do, but now that Zhang Feng had called him, he had to go. After Old Ma left, Zhang Feng hurried into the villa. At this time, Jing Shu and Zhang Yuyao were whispering to each other. Sometimes, Zhang Yuyao would touch Jing Shu's belly, and sometimes her face would turn red. If not for the fact that Jing Shu was not pregnant, Zhang Feng would have seriously suspected that Jing Shu was pregnant. What are you two talking about? Zhang Feng was a little embarrassed by the gazes of the two. Obviously, Zhang Yuyao's disdainful eyes told him that she already knew what had just happened. Zhang Feng could not help but sigh again. This world was really King good. If you dared to be so bold in the future, you would have a kitchen knife on your neck by now. The two women didn't speak. Zhang Feng didn't know what to say. He rubbed his nose and said, Yu Yao, tell little Cui Air to go down the mountain immediately. I have something important to tell her to do. He saw that Zhang Feng had something to do. It wasn't good for the two women to harp on such a trivial matter. Zhang Yuyao asked curiously, what's the matter? Do you have any fields at home? Zhang Yuyao didn't know what Zhang Feng was going to say. At this time, she was stunned. She hesitated for a moment and counted with her fingers for a long time before saying, my family should have 7 mu of land now. What's wrong? Zhang Feng nodded and then said, quickly ask your father to find Niu Weili and tell him that I said to buy land with whatever money you have. Ha! Jing Shu and Zhang Yuyao were stunned. But a moment later, they thought of the key point of the problem and said, is this related to phosphate fertilizers? Yes. Zhang Feng nodded and said, then quickly go to the mansion and find Du Ziting. Ask him to take out all the money in the family and buy as much land as possible near Shao Mountain. Don't worry about money. We have plenty of money. This time, the two women didn't understand. They thought that Zhang Feng had not woken up because of yesterday's stimulation, and their expressions changed drastically. Prince Zhang, what's wrong with you? Brother Feng, if you can't do it, let Dr. Sun take a look at you. Zhang Feng rolled his eyes speechlessly. He put the two women in his arms and said, I'm better than ever now. Let's not talk about it anymore. You two can do as you see fit. It's best if you can do it today or as soon as possible. Later, I'll hold a public experiment class. I believe that once my experiment class is over, the possibility of buying another piece of land will be slim. The two women were completely stunned. However, he still hurriedly went to do as Zhang Feng said. Zhang Feng grabbed Zhang Yuyao and Jing Shu and said, by the way, go to the Chen mansion and tell them about this. Zhang Feng could be considered to have done all he could. As for what Master Chen thought, it was not something he could decide. However, this land must be bought. The land in Chang'an City. Before this, it was definitely worthless, but after today, it would be worth a lot. Zhang Feng dared to bet. As long as he operated properly, in the future, he would earn more than a little. If he could get real estate out. Hee. As for Lao Li and the others, Zhang Feng was never worried. After all, they had known about this for a long time. How could they not buy it? That would be a strange thing. In the past, this thing was very tricky. Coupled with the fact that seeds were difficult to buy this year, many people basically exchanged their land for seeds. But after the fact that phosphate fertilizer could increase production was confirmed, Zhang Feng believed that if anyone dared to sell land, they would be a real fool. Chapter 1435. Without waiting for Old He's people to enter the room, Li Shimin and the others had already entered Zhang Feng's villa. As soon as they entered the door, Li Shimin couldn't wait to ask, "Fengzi, when are you going to do this?" For a moment, Zhang Feng suddenly forgot what Li Shimin said. But at this time, seeing him say this, he asked with a slight doubt, "What are you talking about? Is there any meaning?" What meaning could there be? Li Shimin was also stunned by Zhang Feng's words in an instant and asked, You, what do you mean? Didn't you say that you wanted us to come and see the experiment?" Zhang Feng patted his forehead and said with a faint smile, "So it's about this. Lao Li, this matter, you have to wait a little bit. We still have another thing to do." Li Shimin didn't understand what Zhang Feng wanted to do, but at this time, when he heard Zhang Feng say this, he had to be patient. But Cheng Yaojin couldn't wait. He had long wanted to see the experiment that Zhang Feng talked about. After all, every day or sometimes when his son came home, he would brag in front of him about how awesome and mysterious this experiment was, but he had never seen it before. At this time, it seemed that Zhang Feng wanted to suppress this matter and didn't intend to experiment. How could this be? Thinking of this, Cheng Yaojin waved his hand and said, "Is someone looking for trouble? If someone is looking for trouble, tell me, I will go and—" Without waiting for him to finish, Li Shimin's face darkened. "Old Hey, that's enough." Cheng Yaojin shrunk his neck and smiled embarrassedly as he retreated to the back. Seeing this, Zhang Feng had to ask them to sit down and then said, "In fact, this matter is very simple. Think about it, if this experiment is really completed, and this time I'm going to give a public lecture, won't the people in the market now suspect that this thing is fake? Even if those who believe in it are still suspicious before they see the real thing, then this time I will directly hold 2 public experiments in the academy and at the foot of the mountain. If I come personally on the mountain, I will hand it over to them. In this way, I believe that the rumors made by the Tang family will naturally be dispelled." Li Shimin's eyes suddenly shook. This is a good idea. However, there are disadvantages to this as well. Think about it. If this thing is stolen by someone else, won't we lose a lot of money? However, Zhang Feng didn't mind. He smiled faintly and said, "If he has the ability, then he can steal it. Does he know the ratio of this thing? He knows how to reach the critical point. He doesn't know anything and yet he is experimenting with it. If he wants to die, he can do it. Anyway, this thing is poisonous, but it is not fatal in small amounts. If any bastard wants to die, I don't mind." Li Shimin was a little hesitant, but he still chose to believe Zhang Feng. After all, this thing was already the kind of thing that no one had ever seen before. If this thing was easy to come out, this guy would be so mysterious and throw it out like salt. Why would he spend so much effort to get it? Thinking of this, Li Shimin suddenly understood. However, Feng Xianling did have a different idea. Although Zhang Feng was right, this was still a secret. He really didn't understand Zhang Feng's operation. Feng Xianling looked at Zhang Sun Wuji and Du Ruhui, who were stroking their beards and narrowing their eyes in contemplation. He wanted to ask. However, seeing the expressions of the two, he just sighed and didn't say anything. Niu Jinda, on the other hand, was very excited at this time. After all, this thing was something he exchanged with his life. If Zhang Feng wanted to get this thing out, then his reputation would also rise. At that time, not to mention other things, at least in the imperial court, his back would be straightened a little. However, the key problem now was that this guy didn't seem to want to do it now. What was the meaning of this? Niu Jinda took advantage of Li Shimin's inattention and hurriedly asked, "Fengzi, what do you mean? Why don't you hurry up and start the experiment? What are you waiting for? We haven't eaten anything yet. We're still waiting to see your thing so that we can have a drink together. You're so slow. How long are you going to wait before you give us a meal?" Zhang Feng laughed and said, "Old Niu Amo, don't be anxious. Let's talk about drinking later. I have a very important thing to ask you. Although you all know about this, there's one important thing that I don't know. Have you thought of it?" They looked at each other suspiciously. Then Li Shimin asked carefully, "Fengzi, is there something else in it?" Zhang Feng shook his head. Actually, there's nothing else. I just want to ask you, did you buy land after knowing about this? In an instant, Zhang Sun Wuji and the others looked at Li Shimin. At that time, they all wanted to buy land, but if it weren't for the emperor's obstruction, they would probably have more land in their hands. Chapter 1436. Li Shimin didn't think so much. When he heard Zhang Feng's question, he wanted to laugh. So this kid was still thinking about making money at this time? Zhang Feng had indeed been thinking about this matter. After all, they were all on the same side. If he could make a fortune, then he definitely wouldn't forget about his brotherhood. And this time, Zhang Feng's intuition told him that this would be his last chance to buy land. Moreover, it was such a cheap land. Want to buy another piece of land in the future? Haha. Li Shimin nodded with a smile. He looked around at everyone and said, "You don't have to worry about this. Although their family's land isn't much, it's at least 1,000 mu. Also, you seem to have forgotten one thing. The last time old Fong went to the field with you, he went around borrowing money to buy land. It caused quite a stir in Chang'an City." When Zhang Feng heard this, his eyes widened. He looked at the usually honest Fong Xianling and asked, "Is old Fong's matter true? Is it true or not?" Zhang Xueli was a little embarrassed, but he still nodded. This time, Zhang Feng was completely convinced by these people. He was a little speechless and said, Forget it, forget it. I also said that we can't let our brothers suffer losses. It seems like you guys are just brothers on the surface. Such a good thing, and you didn't even ask me to join you? If you all bought it, then pretend that I didn't say anything. You can go to Mr. Bo Shi's place and wait for him, or go directly to the school district. I'll wait for the old Xiaocai and the village chief to come over. Then I'll go over. Li Shimin looked at Zhang Feng in surprise. He looked at Zhang Feng with a strange expression and said, "Do you want everyone in Tonghui Fong to buy land?" Zhang Feng nodded and said, "Yes, aren't they all neighbors? Since there's a matter of making money, then of course I have to pull them in. Besides, if it wasn't for their help on the mountain, then I would be busy to death. I want to rely on you guys, but you guys are so busy that I can't even see your shadow for a few days. If I don't rely on them, who else can I rely on?" Their faces stiffened and they looked around as if they were looking for something. To put it bluntly, they didn't want to lower themselves to Zhang Feng's level. How could Zhang Feng not know what these people were thinking? He sighed and prepared to ask them to leave. However, at this moment, Du Ruhui faintly said, "Feng Zi, if you are thinking for them, I advise you to ask them to buy less." Zhang Feng asked in surprise, "Why? You can't bite off more than you can chew. Besides, think about it. If so many people suddenly buy land on a large scale, let's not talk about whether the law of the Tang dynasty allows it or not. Let's talk about how others will view it. Now the entire academy is being watched by people all over the world. Once something happens on the mountain, it will definitely spread throughout the Great Wall in less than a day. You also know that the commotion you caused in Chang'an City 2 days ago hasn't stopped. Up until now, everyone would be drawn over by the slightest bit of news about White Deer Academy. Just think about the consequences if you continue causing trouble like this." After finishing his words, Du Ruhui gave Zhang Feng a meaningful look. This stumped Zhang Feng. He really didn't think of this. After all, he wasn't very clear about some of the laws of the Tang dynasty. After looking around, he stared at Fong Xianling and asked, "Old Fong, what's going on? Are ordinary people not allowed to buy land?" Fong Xianling waited for a while. Seeing that Li Shimin didn't say anything, he sorted out his thoughts and said, "In fact, it's not that people are not allowed to buy land, but how should I put it? Indeed, there's no explicit rule in the laws of the Tang dynasty that forbids people from buying land. But there's one thing you may not know, and that is their ability. Think about it. If you suddenly give a bucket of water to a person who has been hungry for 3 days, he will be stuffed to death. In fact, the principle is the same. Besides, do you think those businessmen and those big families in Chang'an City will sit back and do nothing? As old Du said just now, everyone's eyes are fixed on the academy. At this time, if so many people suddenly rush down, think about it, it will cause everyone in Chang'an City to buy land. Think about it. Even if Chang'an expands all the places within the Guanyi Road, how much land can be bought? How much land can ordinary people buy? If you don't buy it now, when the phosphate fertilizer comes out in the future, the emperor may use this as a reward and give some land to the commoners. Basically, every household will have land to plant. Isn't this better? But if everyone is like you, then what about the rest? Hearing this, Zhang Feng's face changed instantly. Well, I've already said it. At this time, I can't take it back, can I? Zhang Feng was a little embarrassed. However, Li Shimin glanced at Zhang Feng indifferently and said, "Then it's your business. We'll go there first. You can come back after you've finished your business. I believe that Niu Weili from the Chang'an local government will come up with a relatively safe way to deal with it." Hearing this, Zhang Feng could only helplessly laugh bitterly and helplessly nod his head. "All right then, you guys go ahead and wait. I'll ask the old village chief. If it really doesn't work, I'll give some of my land to them." Li Shimin, who had already walked to the door, looked at Zhang Feng strangely and said, "What, just now, did you?" Chapter 1437. Zhang Feng didn't think too much about it. He just wanted the people around him to live a happy and prosperous life. Li Shimin already knew about Zhang Feng's thoughts. However, he couldn't help but ask out of curiosity when he heard Zhang Feng's intentions. After all, the 4 properties that were confiscated 2 days ago were all in his hands. He was also thinking about finding a suitable opportunity to give it to Zhang Feng. However, now that he looked at it, fine. He thought too highly of himself. After all, he heard that he had earned a lot from cooperating with Niu Weili in basketball and football. It seemed that he had earned a few 100,000 taels of silver. This wasn't a small amount. At this time, basketball, football, and morning exercises were basically common in the Tang dynasty. It was normal for him to earn this kind of income. Li Shimin narrowed his eyes and asked, "Did you go to buy land?" Hearing this, Yu Qigong and the others looked at Zhang Feng with strange expressions. Zhang Feng smiled embarrassedly. "Yes, something like that." "How much did you buy?" Zhang Feng didn't think too much about it. After all, who knew how much land these masters had? The little bit he bought probably wasn't even a fraction of what they had bought over the past few months. This was only the land that these masters owned in Chang'an City. Their properties were spread throughout the Tang dynasty. It could be said that even if they didn't have 100,000 taels of land, they weren't far from 100,000 taels of land. The little bit of land he bought was nothing. Not much. Last time, Jingshu made the decision to buy all the land from the coal mine in Lantian all the way to the riverside in Mount Shao. They were speechless. It turned out that this kid had been buying land since a long time ago. The piece of land from Lantian all the way to White Deer Institute could be said to be a rare piece of good land in the Guanyi circuit. However, because it was relatively long and narrow, and if a war were to break out, it would definitely suffer calamity. Moreover, its location was relatively special, so very few people dared to have any ideas about that piece of land. However, they didn't expect this kid to have it in his hands long ago. Li Shimin was still thinking about whether he should use that piece of land as an experimental field for the imperial family. After all, it was something that had to be put on display. He didn't expect this kid to buy it long ago. Li Shimin didn't mind and asked, "Then where did you buy it this time? Tell me. If it doesn't work, I'll use my connections to give you a discount." After all, he knew that Zhang Feng had at least 300,000 taels of silver in his residence. If he used it all to buy land, how much land would he be able to buy land? Right now, land could be bought for between 1,000 and 2,000 strings of coins per mu. If converted to silver taels, it would be 1 tael of silver for 1 mu of land. More than 300,000 taels of silver. This. Even Li Shimin couldn't help but gasp when he thought of this. Zhang Feng was a little embarrassed. He pointed in the direction of Chang'an City and said, "Actually, it's not much. I'll buy it all from the entrance of Chang'an City to the academy. After all, after buying it, it will belong to us. When the time comes." Without waiting for him to finish, Li Shimin's voice changed. He asked in a trembling voice, You bought it all?" As he spoke, Li Shimin couldn't help but look in the direction of the second floor, as if he wanted to see if Zhang Yuyao and Lin Mengyao were still there. Did they go in to buy land? At this time, Yu Qigong, Chang Yaojin, Niu Jinda, and the others were already looking at Zhang Feng in shock. And Zhang Feng's image was instantly shocking to them. This place was different from other places. From a military point of view, this piece of open land was a buffer zone for the city, which was also an offensive and defensive area. Every city had an incomparably vast open space. Basically, this piece of land was an area for the people inside and outside the city to react to the situation. If there was a war and the enemy attacked, they would go out of the city to fight in a short time. Otherwise, it would be the place where the two armies faced each other. If it was an ordinary person, no one would have the courage to buy this place. Moreover, no one would dare to sell this place. After all, this piece of land belonged to the city defense area. But they never expected that Zhang Feng, a hothead, would actually buy this piece of land. They didn't know whether they should feel that Zhang Feng was awesome, or that they should feel that Zhang Feng was stupid. At this time, Zhang Feng saw that their expressions were strange. He slowly realized that things seemed to be a bit unusual. He quickly asked, "What's with your expressions? Is there something different about this piece of land? Or is it that this piece of land can't be bought?" Li Shimin didn't want to talk anymore. He waved his hand and said, "Old Yu, tell him." Seeing this, Yu Qigong directly gave Zhang Feng a thumbs up and said, "Fengzi, Lao Tzu has never admired people, especially young people. But among the young people that Lao Tzu knows, if you dare to say that you are number 2, then you dare to say that you are number 1. If there is someone who dares to say that, then Lao Tzu will slap him down." Zhang Feng was a bit confused. How could he praise someone like that? Everyone knew that Zhang Feng was smart, but wasn't it a bit too much to say such words at this time? Zhang Feng saw that everyone's expressions were strange. He quickly pulled Yu Qigong to the side and whispered, "Old Yu, tell me something. Is there a problem with this piece of land?" Yu Qigong looked at Li Shimin's people and then looked at Zhang Feng. "Are you sure that you don't know anything?" Zhang Feng shook his head with a dumbfounded expression. Seeing this, Yu Qigong patted Zhang Feng's shoulder. Zhang Feng's face instantly turned pale. His body shrank and he almost fell to the ground. Yu Qigong didn't even look at Zhang Feng. He said with great admiration, "Actually, everyone has their eyes on this piece of land. Otherwise, do you think that those dukes and nobles would let go of this piece of land? But do you know why they don't want to buy this piece of land?" How would Zhang Feng know? He hurriedly cupped his fist and asked for advice. Yu Qigong said, "Because no one dares to sell this piece of land, including the current emperor. He doesn't dare to sell it." Zhang Feng's expression changed. He asked, "What do you mean?" "Because this piece of land belongs to the two armies. Who do you think would dare to sell this piece of land?" Chapter 1438. Zhang Feng really didn't expect this. There was actually such a way to open up a fertile wasteland stretching from the moat of Chang'an City to the barren mountain pass? How large was the area? Zhang Feng didn't know. Anyway, it would take an hour to go from the gate of Chang'an City to the sentry post of the barren mountain pass by carriage. Zhang Feng estimated that if he went in a straight line, it would be about 2 or 3 kilometers. 2 or 3 kilometers. How large was the area? Such a large piece of land was a strategic location? Then, this Shao Mountain. Zhang Feng suddenly had a feeling of going to Tesco. He seemed to understand something at this time. This Shao Mountain originally belonged to the Zhongnan Mountains, and it also belonged to the Qinling Mountains. There were 2 main peaks in Shao Mountain, and the academy was built on a large area between the 2 main peaks, which was like a gold ingot. Such a terrain. It was not a strategic place, was it? Moreover, now he was here, plus the firearms and other new weapons were in the research and development. Once this thing came out, how could there be any war in Chang'an City, which belonged to the hinterland of the Tang dynasty? Wasn't this nonsense? Such a fertile land was empty. How could it be burned? But looking at the long river of history, Zhang Feng felt that it was unfair at this time, but in fact, he just felt unhappy. Since it was the battlefield of the city gate, there had been many ghosts since ancient times. Although Zhang Feng didn't believe in ghosts and gods, if he didn't believe in them, how could he explain his situation? Seeing this, Li Shimin asked, "Fengzi, are you sure you have asked someone to buy it?" Zhang Feng said hesitantly, "Well, you can say that. By the way, it's okay if I can't buy this land. Niu Weili will naturally arrange it for me. Go, let's not talk about it. Let's do the experiment." When Li Shimin saw Zhang Feng's current appearance, he found it somewhat funny and said, "Although the area around the city gate is indeed not for sale, if you really want to buy it, you can walk 10,000 steps out of the city and use your connections." Zhang Feng sighed and said, Forget it. My luck is not good. The fat meat that caught my eye belongs to the emperor. Let's not talk about this anymore. Let's go to the teaching building and attend today's open experimental class. While speaking, Zhang Feng pulled Li Shimin towards the door. Just as he walked out of the villa, Zhang Feng ran into the old village chief and several others who had heard the news. As soon as they met, the old village head directly asked, "Feng Zi, what's the matter? I just heard that you were looking for us in a hurry." When Zhang Feng saw this, he instantly felt a headache coming on. He glanced at Li Shimin and hurriedly said, "Lao Li, you guys go ahead and wait. I'll be right there, okay?" Li Shimin still did not know what Zhang Feng wanted to do. He looked at Zhang Feng with a smile that was not a smile, and then slowly left with the others. In fact, there was no need to hide this matter. The key point was that it was really a bit embarrassing. After Li Shimin left, Zhang Feng said, "Old village chief, do you have any fields in your family?" This time, the few people were dumbfounded. The old village chief and the others looked at each other, and then looked at Zhang Feng with some confusion and said, "Just because of this?" "We do have some fields in our family, but what do you mean by this?" When Zhang Feng heard this, he nodded his head. In this era, there were two kinds of fields: teaching fields and perpetual fields. Normally, a family like the old village chief had about 100 mu of land, and this 100 mu of land was nothing much. Only a few mu of land could be cultivated. After the person who divided the fields came over to register them, the slope, wasteland, or even a mountain in the chaotic world were basically hundreds of mu of land. These were all considered fields. In addition, the people in this era basically had a stable harvest, and the fields were barren. In addition, the land was vast and sparsely populated. Therefore, the government was considered generous and basically waved their hands. They directly had 100 mu of land. However, moreover, these fields were all carefully selected. The teaching fields were never divided into rivers or lakes. Basically, when the government came, if they saw that you were happy, they would give you a good piece of land. If you were unhappy, even the Wei Shui River could be your family's. Only the thin 20 mu of perpetual fields could be considered a little bit of land that could be cultivated. However, by the time you cleared the trees and weeds in the land, it would basically be a few years later. Therefore, in this era, although the land was vast and sparsely populated, and with the equal field system, most ordinary people still did not have enough to eat. They had to go to those big families to work to make ends meet. Although the equal field system had its advantages, the disadvantages were also obvious. Slaves and women would never be given any land. Only men who were 18 years old and men who were 21 years old could be allocated land. And if the head of the family already had a fief, he would basically only be given 20 mu of perpetual fields. The system of the Tang dynasty was really too chaotic. In addition, the land was barren and the years of war. Basically, although there were many fields, ordinary people still did not have enough to eat. Most people could not even afford to buy seeds. The old village chief was better. Although he was already over 70 years old, and the teaching fields had been taken back. However, he had many sons, and with good luck, the fields that were allocated were basically some good ones. His family would not starve. However, old he and the others were miserable. Old he was originally a slave, and he only had 2 mu of land as a token. Most of the land was basically rented from those big families. Therefore, all year round, he could only muddle through with a full belly. At this time, when they heard Zhang Feng's question, everyone scratched their heads in confusion. They looked at Zhang Feng with a dumbfounded expression. After understanding the situation, Zhang Feng waved his hand and said, "Old village chief, quickly go to the food factory and the paper mill and take out some money. Then go to Niu Weili, the county magistrate, and take out as much as you can." Hearing this, the old village chief's expression changed instantly. He thought that Zhang Feng was going to squander. He said, "Fengzi, you can't do this. Although you have a noble title, you can't afford this kind of torment. You are not married yet. You don't dare to." Zhang Feng hurriedly interrupted the old village chief and said, "That's not what I mean. What I mean is, quickly take the money and buy as much land as you can." Chapter 1439. The old village chief and the others were stunned. Although they knew about the phosphate fertilizer, they had never seen it before. However, he hadn't seen the specific situation of phosphate fertilizers, so he didn't dare to speak carelessly. At this moment, Zhang Feng actually asked them to buy land? And buy as much as they could? Wasn't this a waste of the immortals? Even if he were to give away that lousy piece of land, no one would want it. It was said that every household had a few dozen mu of land, but how many of them could actually grow crops? At most, they could only grow 1 or 2 acres of land. Just this. Buy more? Do you have too much money to burn? But before he could say anything, Zhang Feng had already run away. The old village chief was so angry that he wanted to argue with Zhang Feng, but Old He hurriedly pulled the old village chief and said, "Old village chief, what did Feng ask me to do? Let's do it. If you're not going, I'll go. I have some friendship with Lord Niu." Sigh. Seeing this, the old village chief stomped his walking stick and said sadly, "What a wastrel." As they spoke, the old village chief, Old He, and the others hurriedly went down the mountain. Although they said that they were not going because they could not bear to part with the money, Zhang Feng naturally had his reasons for asking them to buy land. If they did not buy it and delayed Zhang Feng's important matter, then it would be bad. Besides, what did Zhang Feng do that time? Was he messing around? And this time, Lao Li and the others were all here. Was something big going to happen? Along the way, the old village chief and Old He were discussing this matter. Along the way, they also encountered a carriage driven by an old horse. When they saw this, they hurriedly stopped Old Ma and said, "Old Ma, why aren't you following Feng? Why are you running away?" Old Ma signaled to the carriage and said, "Well, the dean asked me to go to Chang'an City to do something. I'll go first. We'll talk later." As he spoke, the old horse urged the carriage to run away like a wisp of smoke. Only the old village chief was left, who was even angrier. What kind of person did Feng find? Doesn't he respect the old at all? Why is there such a bore in the academy? Old He and Juzi's father looked at each other. Then they also found a slide pole at the foot of the mountain and dragged it along. The old village chief then ran into the city. With the old village chief's small feet, it was estimated that he would not be able to reach the city even if he walked until tomorrow. When the 3 of them arrived at the Chang'an local government, Old Ma, Zhang Yuyao, and Jing Shu saw them off respectfully under Niu Weili's smiling face. This time, the old village head instantly understood. Why was this kid so busy? It turned out that Feng Zi's 2 wives were sitting in the carriage. At this moment, the smile on the village chief's face blossomed like a chrysanthemum. "Yu Yao." While speaking, the old village head changed his sickly appearance and didn't let anyone help him. Leaning on his crutch, he walked towards the carriage. Niu Weili naturally knew the relationship between these people. Seeing this, he couldn't stop him and stepped aside. Seeing it was the old village chief, Zhang Yuyao hurriedly got off the carriage and said, "Old village chief, what are you doing here?" Seeing this, the old village chief sighed sadly and said, "It's your man. You have to take care of him. Otherwise, you won't know when he will squander all your money." Zhang Yuyao blushed, but Niu Weili pricked up his ears to eavesdrop. However, he was embarrassed by the stares of Old Ma and Old He, so he pretended not to see and walked aside. At this time, Zhang Yuyao smiled and said, "Old village chief, what do you mean?" "You don't know. I don't know what's wrong with Fengzi just now. He asked me to bring money to buy land. Tell me, isn't it squandering money to buy land at this time?" Hearing this, Zhang Yuyao and Jing Shu looked at each other and smiled. She pulled the old scholar aside and comforted him. After the old scholar calmed down, she whispered, "To be honest, I'm also here to buy land. And to tell you the truth, Lao Li and the others have already bought thousands of acres of good land." Hearing this, the old village chief and Old He looked at Zhang Yuyao in shock and then at Old Ma. After Old Ma nodded and confirmed this matter, even Old He couldn't help but ask, "Miss Zhang, how much land did Fengzi ask you to buy?" Zhang Yuyao pursed her lips and said, "Well, you should wait and ask Lord Niu about this. I still have something to do, so I have to go back to my father's place. Let's talk about it when we go up the mountain." As she spoke, Zhang Yuyao hurriedly left with Jing Shu and Old Ma. The old village chief looked at the carriage in the distance and sighed painfully. They're all a bunch of prodigals. What's so good about buying this lousy land? If someone wants to buy it, I'll sell my lousy land. Ahem. At this time, Niu Weili coughed and the 3 of them immediately reacted. After all, Old He had met Niu Weili a few times, and it was about the rubber factory, so they could be considered acquaintances. At this time, the 2 of them cupped their fists and greeted each other. "Lord Niu." "Old He, what are you doing here?" Nyo Whaley asked as he invited the three of them into the magistrate's office. As soon as they entered, Old He saw that there was no one around and said, "Fengzi asked us to buy a lot of land. I don't know what this is about. Lord Nyo, after all, you have a lot of connections. Can you take a look and tell us what's going on?" When Nyo Whaley heard this, he looked at the three of them strangely and asked, "Are you sure you don't know?" Old He smiled bitterly and spread out his hands. "If we knew, why would we bother Lord Nyo?" The old village chief was still heartbroken. "Like I said, this Fengzi is a prodigal. What's the use of this thing?" When Nyo Whaley heard this, he couldn't help but laugh. "It's not just you guys. I'm also puzzled now. Do you know how much land Prince Zhang's two wives just bought?" The old village chief hurriedly asked. "How much?" Nyo Whaley raised 3 fingers and said slowly, 300 hectares. Chapter 1440. When the old village chief heard this, he was almost sent away. He hurriedly rubbed his eyes and asked again in shock, "How much did you say?" "You didn't hear wrong. 300 hectares. These things were classified, but he had some friendship with these people. In addition, these people were the people Zhang Feng cared about the most, so he couldn't offend them. After all, he had to rely on Zhang Feng for everything he ate and drank. If it weren't for Zhang Feng, he would still be living on that meager amount of food." Because of Zhang Feng's rubber factory and the security fees from the Shaoshan market, Nyo Whaley had bought 3 properties in the most prosperous area of Chang'an City. This didn't include the land he bought and the 3 big boxes in his house that emitted the smell of copper coins. These were all genuine goods at a fair price, and they were all legitimate income. But just now, he didn't know what was wrong with Zhang Feng. He actually asked his wife to tell him to buy land. What kind of logic was this? Although he knew about what happened on the mountain and the phosphate fertilizer, no one had ever used it or seen it before. Even if it had miraculous effects, they should have at least produced it. If you didn't produce it and no one had seen or used it, although Nyo Whaley believed in it, but he didn't dare to be rash. At this time, Nyo Whaley's words completely stunned the old village chief and the others. 300 hectares. Not 300 hectares. Was this Fengzi crazy? He actually bought so much land that no one wanted? The old village chief hurriedly said, "Old Master Nyo, you have some friendship with Fengzi. You must know more about the things in the palace than us. Tell me, what is Fengzi playing at this time?" Nyo Whaley smiled bitterly and said, "I don't know about this either. There hasn't been any major events recently, so I don't know. Just now, I heard from Mrs. Zhang that Fengzi actually asked everyone he knew, including the old soldiers of the Peace House, to buy land. I don't know what Fengzi is thinking, and he even asked me to buy land." Hearing this, the old village chief hurriedly asked, "Then, did you buy it?" Nyo Whaley didn't want to buy it, but since Zhang Feng said it, he couldn't refuse. Moreover, when did this kid do anything stupid? He naturally had his reasons for getting so many people to buy the land. He nodded and said, "Naturally, I bought a dozen or so mu of land. After all, this official only has this much, and it was accumulated over the years." As for what Nyo Whaley said after that, only a fool would believe it. The old village chief and the others didn't mind, but they were even more confused. He had no idea what Zhang Feng was up to. So many people came to buy land. What was the meaning of this? Although the old village head didn't know what this meant, he couldn't sit still with so many people buying. He increasingly felt that Zhang Feng was going to do something big. As for what it was, although he wasn't sure, his intuition told him that he still had to buy this land. At this time, Nyo Whaley no longer had the desire to chat with them. He asked, "What are you doing here?" With this question, the old village chief and the other 2 were pulled back. They hurriedly said, "We are also here to buy land." Nyo Whaley was stunned. He asked, "Then how much are you planning to buy?" Although he knew that Zhang Feng treated these people very well, how much money could they take out to buy land? How much could they buy? After the old village chief pulled old He and the others aside and muttered for a while, they unanimously decided that it was better to buy less. After all, everyone was buying now. Zhang Feng wouldn't be so bored as to play around with money like this. Therefore, in the end, the old village chief made the decision. He reluctantly took out a dozen silver notes and placed them in front of Nyo Whaley. "Lord Nyo, these are 1,700 taels of silver notes. We'll buy The instant the banknotes were handed over to Nyo Whaley, the old village head took back a few more banknotes. After counting exactly 10 banknotes, he painfully handed them over to Nyo Whaley and said, "Lord Nyo, this is what Feng Zi told me to do. Moreover, Feng Zi treats you so well, you have to properly choose some good land for us." The corner of Nyo Whaley's mouth twitched. There was no need to count the silver notes. He directly took them and stuffed them into his clothes. The silver notes had almost been worn out by the old village chief. There was no need to count them. He took out the account book and flipped through it. There is a tunnel, but it's a little far. It's outside Tunghua Gate, next to Longzhou Mountain. It's about 1,000 mu. You don't want it? If you want it, I can get it for you. Yes. When the old village chief heard this, the bitterness on his face instantly turned into joy. That place was a rare piece of fertile land. Although it was a little far, it was next to Longzhou Canal. It was a rare and good place. After the money was settled, the old village chief, Old He, and Zhu Zi's father counted with their fingers and basically bought all the land for everyone in Tunghua Square. Although the money they brought today was far more than this. According to the old village chief's previous thoughts, he wouldn't buy a single word of land. The reason he was willing to pay for these useless things was all because of Zhang Feng. After busying himself for more than 2 hours, Nyo Whaley finally sent the old village chief and the others away. Looking at the backs of the 3 people, Nyo Whaley squinted his eyes and looked at the account book. He gritted his teeth and shouted, "Advisor!" After a moment, an old man with a mustache slowly entered the room. Nyo Whaley didn't even raise his head as he said, "Quickly bring all the money I have." The advisor was stunned and hurriedly asked, "Master, I want to buy land." Chapter 1441. In fact, Nyo Whaley didn't have much money. After cooperating with Zhang Feng, he didn't have much money. Although it wasn't much, it was still an astronomical figure for other county magistrates. At this time, he could take out all his money to buy land, which showed that he trusted Zhang Feng. This time he could really make a lot of money. But he didn't know that this was just the beginning. As he made his move, all the people in the county government who could afford to buy land, who could afford it, and who had the money to buy land, basically bought land like crazy. In less than a moment, Zhang Shan also hurried to buy land with more than a dozen carriages of copper coins. Such a flashy scene startled the people in Chang'an City. This was not a big deal. Before Zhang Shan's matter was dealt with, people from Qian Tong's mansion also came. This time, Qian Tong's butler was not so old-fashioned. He directly took out a banknote worth 100,000 taels of silver and threw it in front of Niu Jinda. This time, the people in Chang'an City couldn't understand. At first, they thought this matter seemed to be related to the business cooperation between Nyo Whaley and Zhang Feng, but they didn't expect that it was not the case at all. Are these people buying land like crazy? Before the crowd could react and understand why these people were buying land so crazily, some of the officials in Chang'an City also came to buy land. It could be said that since Qian Tong's butler left, people had never stopped coming to buy land at the gate of the Chang'an local government. At this time, Nyo Whaley also panicked. He hurriedly sent a booklet to the Ministry of Personnel. This time it was better. This booklet appeared in Li Xiaogong's hand. Li Xiaogong was a little confused. Within 2 hours, the whole city of Chang'an was in chaos. Originally, this was a good thing for the imperial court, which was vast and sparsely populated. Moreover, he knew that Feng Xianling had bought a piece of land. Judging from the current situation, Li Xiaogong couldn't help but be a little confused. Could it be that there's something I don't know? Staring at the document in front of him, Li Xiaogong frowned and pondered for about the time it took to brew a cup of tea. Then, he waved his sleeve and said, "Butler!" A middle-aged man standing outside the door hurried into Li Xiaogong's study. "Master!" Li Xiaogong wrote 2 documents and said, "Send this document to White Deer College immediately and hand it over to His Majesty. There must be no mistakes. Also, how much spare money do we have in our residence?" With this question, the housekeeper was a little confused and hurriedly said, "This month's salary hasn't been paid yet. At this time, there are only a little more than 10,000 taels of silver left in the house. In addition to the banknotes and gold leaves in the house, there are about 100,000 taels of silver." Hearing this, Li Xiaogong frowned slightly. Why are there still so many? In his memory, there seemed to be more money in the family than this. Seeing this, the butler hurriedly said, Master, most of the money has been sent to Luozhou Resort, so... Hearing this, Li Xiaogong suddenly understood. He waved his hand and said, let's not worry about this for now. Go and use all the money in the house to buy land. Buy as much as you can. Also, immediately inform Luozhou to do the same. There must be no mistakes. Li Xiaogong had a hunch that this matter seemed to be related to the phosphate fertilizer. And this time, people from the mountain came down to buy land. Especially Zhang Feng's two womenfolk. There must be a big movement. Master, how should we reply to the Chong and local government? Hearing this, Li Xiaogong frowned and pondered for a moment. Then he said, give an order first. This matter is temporarily suspended. If anyone asks, just say that there is no land to sell at the moment. At the same time. At this time, the mountain was not peaceful. This was especially true for the people of Tong Hui Fong. After hearing about this matter from the old village chief, everyone started scheming. On the mountain, more than 3,000 students were sitting in the square excitedly, waiting for Zhang Feng's arrival. On the field, Li Chengqian and the others were already prepared, but Zhang Feng still hadn't arrived. Looking at the long and strange table covered in white cloth, and then looking at the bottles and jars on the table that were transparent like ice, all the students were stupefied. Li Shimin and the others were also surprised at this time. But seeing that Zhang Feng was not coming, they were also a little anxious. Li Shimin looked at the students below the stage and Li Chengqian, who was wearing a mask, and whispered to Wei Zhang, who was next to him. Old Wei, do you think something will happen at the foot of the mountain? Wei Zhang was stunned and hurriedly said, nothing will happen, right? After all this matter. Without waiting for him to finish, Xiao Gizi hurriedly bent over and jumped on the stage. He squatted behind Li Shimin and said with a strange face, Second Master, just now the news from the foot of the mountain said that after Miss Zhang and the others went down the mountain, the whole Chang'an city was in an uproar, and many people ran to buy land. Li Shimin heard this and was instantly stunned. He had noticed that something was wrong and had been uneasy. Before, he did not know what was going on. Now that Xiao Gizi said this, Li Shimin could not sit still. He suddenly jumped up from the chair and asked, did Fengzi really buy the land at the gate of the city? This. Chapter 1442. Li Shimin seriously doubted whether this Niu Weili would dare to sell that piece of land without using his brain. If he really did sell that piece of land, then there would be a lot of trouble. Just as Li Shimin was letting his imagination run wild, Zhang Feng changed into his iconic white robe and slowly walked over with his hands clasped behind his back. What awaited him was the sound of a tsunami. Seeing this, Li Shimin waved his hand and said, quickly send a message to Li Xiaogong and tell him to stop selling the land. As for other matters, wait until I return to the palace to discuss them. As Li Shimin's voice fell, Zhang Feng also slowly walked up to the high platform. At this moment, on the high platform, Ouyang Sun, old elementary scholar Sun Simiao, Li Gang, and the others sat at the front with the best view. Behind them were Li Shimin, Wei Zhang, and the others. Although this kind of arrangement usually didn't happen, it was because of Li Shimin's identity that this was the case. Zhang Feng first greeted everyone and glanced at little Gizi. A trace of surprise flashed through his eyes, but in the end, he didn't take it seriously. After waving his hand to silence the students, he said, a few days ago, because of some matters, you all know about your classmate Qian Wanli's matter, right? It was because of this phosphate fertilizer that Qian Wanli fell into the hands of evil people. Because of this, I have decided today to use practical actions to uphold justice for Qian Wanli. Didn't some people spread rumors that our phosphate fertilizer was poisonous? Didn't some people say that there was a problem with our phosphate fertilizer? Then today, I won't wear this mask and will do an experiment for everyone. You will be able to learn these things in the future. But there is one point that you must remember clearly, and that is that everything you learn is the foundation of the country. You must be like those birds and know how to reciprocate. Do you all remember? When the 3,000+ students heard this, they all bowed and said, we obey the dean's orders. Hearing this, Zhang Feng gestured with his hands to silence the crowd. He turned to Yu Shernan and the others and said, respected teachers, is that kid going to start now? Yu Shernan nodded and glanced at Li Shimin. Seeing Li Shimin nod without a trace, he said, then let's start. But are you sure that this thing is no longer poisonous? Apart from the more than 3,000 students from Chang'an University and White Deer Academy, there were also craftsmen from the various academies present. Most importantly, the emperor was also present. If something went wrong, it would be no laughing matter. Zhang Feng smiled indifferently and said, "The phosphate stone will not poison people in an open and ventilated place. Moreover, with such a small amount, it won't poison people." As for old Nyo and the others, it was because they stayed on the phosphate mine mountain for a night and pulled dozens of wagons of or along the way. It would be strange if they were not poisoned. And the poisoning of Li Gon and the others was an accident. Because of the improper experiment, the high-pressure phosphate fertilizer leaked out. Hearing this, everyone was enlightened. Li Shimin pulled off the mask on his mouth and said with a smile, "If that's the case, why should I wear this? Although it's exquisite, it's still a little suffocating." As he spoke, Li Shimin was about to light a cigarette. But before he could light the cigarette, Zhang Feng hurriedly stopped him. Although the cigarette would not cause any harm, but what if it did? "Laoli, at this time we're still fine. This thing is not a joke. I don't know if this fire will cause any other problems. So, after the experiment is over, I'll treat you to a cigarette. How about that?" "Okay, let's not talk about it. Just watch." As he spoke, Zhang Feng personally walked down from the podium. When Li Changqian and the others saw this, they hurriedly took out some phosphate ores that they had prepared in advance and put them on the grinder to grind them slowly. When Zhang Feng arrived on the stage, the entire academy was silent. Everyone stared at Zhang Feng's every move with their eyes wide open. They saw Zhang Feng use a small shovel to grind some powder on the grinder and put it in a strange bottle with a big belly. Then, he lit an oil lamp under the bottle. Then, he put a glass jar over the mouth of the bottle. Not long after, a milky white smoke flowed along the canister and slowly flowed into another large bottle. The large bottle was about half filled with water, and the smoke miraculously flowed along the canister into the bottom of the bottle. Logically speaking, the smoke should be able to float. But the amazing thing was, the smoke not only did not float, but also sank to the bottom of the water. It swirled at the bottom of the water, and some white powder slowly appeared at the bottom of the bottle. Although the test bench was not big, but the people who were not far from the test bench saw it clearly. Only the students who were far away stretched their necks and waited for the test bench. And Li Shimin and the others had never seen such a magical thing. It could actually make the smoke settle in the water. This was amazing enough. After a round of operation, Zhang Feng pointed to the powder at the bottom of the water and said, "Everyone, this is the phosphorus element, which is the material used to make phosphorus fertilizer." Chapter 1443. Zhang Feng's words. Instantly, all the students were in an uproar. Even Yu Shernan and the others on the stage, along with Sun Simiao, hurried to Zhang Feng's side with their masks. Li Shimin wanted to come, but he was helplessly pressed down on the chair by Niu Jinda. He couldn't get up even if he wanted to. He was so suffocated that his whole face turned red. Li Shimin was cornered. He glared at Niu Jinda and said, "What do you mean by this?" "Second master, you'd better bear with it first. I know the power of this thing. It's something that people don't even dare to smell. Fengzi is young. He can withstand it." "Then you mean that my body is very weak?" In an instant, Li Shimin's words made Niu Jinda's body tremble. He hurriedly explained, No, I mean, it's..." After hemming and hawing for a long time, Li Shimin was also impatient. He said, "I came here today for this thing. If even I shrink back, won't I become a laughingstock?" Wei Zhang and the others were also frightened by the matter between Niu Jinda and the emperor. However, when he saw that it was because of this matter, Wei Zhang hurriedly went forward to persuade Li Shimin. "Second master, just watch. Don't go forward." Yes, second master. If you go forward, how big of a sin will we be committing?" Li Shimin finally understood. These people had already discussed it. They were afraid that he would do something. They were afraid that something would happen to him. However, if he didn't go today and witness it with his own eyes, he would really be letting his conscience down. "Shut up!" Li Shimin's slightly angry roar instantly made several people shut up. Yu Shernan and the others heard it, but they couldn't say anything. After all, this was a matter of the court. What could they say? Moreover, it was the first time they saw this thing. It was also very rare. After all, there were some things that could not be helped. Under Li Shimin's scolding, although Feng Xianling and the others were still somewhat unwilling, They didn't dare to say anything since they were on the mountain after all. They could only make way for Li Shimin. Li Shimin thought about it and put on the mask. In fact, he really didn't want to wear this thing. He always wondered if this thing was a bit inauspicious. However, if he didn't wear it, it would make everyone nag, so Li Shimin still chose to wear it. When the few of them walked onto the stage, the first round of refining had already ended. Zhang Feng was currently sorting out the residue in the equipment and the small amount of phosphate fertilizer that had been refined. The extraction of phosphate fertilizer was actually very simple. It was to add some sodium nitrate, which was also known as lime powder, into the water. Then, the phosphorus element gas, which had been distilled at high temperatures, was introduced into the water. After a chemical reaction, the precipitated phosphate fertilizer, which was also known as phosphorus nitrate. This was also the simplest thing that Zhang Feng could make based on the things of the current era. It was also the most acceptable thing for everyone. Zhang Feng was actually very troubled. These things actually didn't need to be done. However, on one hand, he couldn't stand it anymore. On the other hand, he really didn't know about the problem of next year's locust plague. After all, only through this year's planting and irrigation, and by entangling the powder in the water, could a series of obstructions be achieved. Next year's things could possibly eliminate the locusts. But Zhang Feng didn't have the ability to completely eliminate the locusts. At the very least, he had to wait until the hot air balloon was accepted by everyone. Then, he could use the hot air balloon to spray pesticides in a large area to possibly stop the locusts. This was only within the territory of the Tang dynasty. As for the matters outside, Zhang Feng couldn't care so much. But even so, whether the locusts could be stopped by then was another matter. Therefore, on the premise that at least the people in his academy, Lao Li, and the others wouldn't starve next year, and on the premise that old Niu accidentally found this thing, Zhang Feng came up with this idea. Otherwise, Zhang Feng really didn't want to do such a troublesome thing. Moreover, it had been leaked out by someone. If he waited until after next year's spring harvest, it didn't matter whether this matter was leaked out or not. However, damn it, he let that old man surnamed Kong come to the mountain and secretly spread the news about the phosphate fertilizer. That was what led to the subsequent matters. Therefore, Zhang Feng was indeed in a bad mood today. The feeling of being made a fool of made him feel very depressed. Therefore, since they were guessing blindly, Lao Tzu would directly lay his cards on the table. Even if their schemes could be deceiving, Lao Tzu wouldn't be afraid. This was where Zhang Feng's confidence came from. Those who believed in him could fill their bellies. Those who didn't believe in him, hee. Good luck to them. Li Shimin and the others wandered around the experiment table, and Li Chengqian assumed the role of a guide, loudly introducing the idea of the experiment. And some of the things on the experiment table. Professional terms. For example, the composition of sodium nitrate and so on. Not to mention Yu Shernan and the others who had been studying Zhang Feng's physics teaching book all day long. Even the more than 3,000 students couldn't stay calm when they heard this at this moment. Is this really what we've been learning all this while? Seeing that Zhang Feng didn't speak, a student hurriedly came forward and asked loudly, "Mr. Dean, is this thing called experiment really so magical? Is it that the snow-like thing is the phosphate fertilizer that can greatly increase the yield of grain?" Chapter 1444. Dean, please enlighten us. Everyone heard this. More than 3,000 students started shouting noisily. What a joke. Although this experiment was a piece of cake for Zhang Feng, to the people of this feudal era, this was undoubtedly the first time they had done something like this since the beginning of time. At this time, if they could really come up with something, or if they could learn this thing, they would be able to use this skill to secure a position in the Ministry of Works. What was this? This was a benefit that could be seen with one's eyes. Moreover, what they were learning now was the theoretical knowledge of these things. Basically, the entire White Deer College learned a variety of things. For example, ancient Chinese and so on were categorized by Zhang Feng into the Chinese series. The students were very puzzled by this title. However, since the dean said so, what could they do? As for mathematics, it was treated as a serious course. These two classes were taught every day. However, these two classes were more complicated, especially the Chinese series, which included ancient Chinese such as the Book of Songs, Tao Te Ching, and so on. There was also a meditation class on the current situation. There was also a dictation class on the future of the Tang dynasty, and so on. In this dictation class, there were also medical lectures and military sand table lessons. As for the medical course, it was basically Sun Simiao who taught some common medical hygiene, physiological hygiene, and so on. There were also some common medical books on the understanding of blood vessels, common treatments for colds and coughs, and some life tips. Although these things seemed extremely simple, after learning them, one would realize that these things were actually too complicated. Not to mention things like aerodynamics, atmospheric pressure, water pressure, and so on. Why could humans float on water? Why was there wind? How was wind formed? And so on. These things undoubtedly revealed the wonders of nature. After seeing the dean and a few senior brothers' personal experiments today, it seemed to have opened a window for these people. Previously, when they saw Zhang Feng's medical lectures and Zhang Feng's treatment of Niu Jianhu's leg, it caused a commotion among the students on the mountain. Many people were completely immersed in medicine. Sun Simiao could not help but be overjoyed. However, this time, the door opened by Zhang Feng made Sun Simiao and the others feel that the world was extremely mysterious. They even unanimously believed that what Zhang Feng said was not true. However, it was not until the last time when the yellow ginger he planted transformed after using phosphate fertilizer that Sun Simiao finally saw Zhang Feng's terrifying talent and the wonders of the technology that Zhang Feng mentioned. Today was also the first time he witnessed such an experiment with his own eyes. Under his eyes, Zhang Feng personally crushed the stone dregs into powder and turned them into wisps of gas through high temperature. Then, through the water at the other end, he turned them into something whiter than snow. That was the phosphate fertilizer last time. Sun Simiao, was it? However, after careful observation and testing, Sun Simiao was shocked to discover that this thing was exactly the same as the phosphate fertilizer that Zhang Feng had given him before. That was to say, this thing was undoubtedly phosphate fertilizer? Sun Simiao saw so many people asking at this time and couldn't help but ask, Fengzi, tell us. Otherwise, old man can be sure that these students will break your door. Zhang Feng sighed and said, since Dr. Sun asked me to tell you, I dare not neglect. Since everyone wants to know, then I will tell you my idea today. Do you know why I made the matter of phosphate fertilizer public today? Someone told me that after I got this thing out, I should let the facts speak for themselves. Someone even told me not to spread this thing and keep it as a family heirloom. There are many such things, but... Zhang Feng looked around and said, I also thought so. In an instant, everyone burst into laughter. In fact, this idea was the truest. If it were them, they would choose to treat this thing as a family heirloom and pass it down. Zhang Feng shook his head and said, wrong. I know that you all want to fight. In fact, I am also a layman. I don't have such high moral integrity, and I have never thought of saving the world. The world has nothing to do with me, Zhang Feng. Yu Shernan couldn't help but frown slightly. The old scholar laughed and said no more. At this time, everyone's expression was different. Some agreed with Zhang Feng's approach, and some thought that Zhang Feng might have been provoked. Some even wanted to stop Zhang Feng from continuing. However, Zhang Feng said loudly, but these are all my previous thoughts. Indeed, we're not saints. To put it bluntly, we're all born and raised by our parents. We're all humans with flesh and blood. As long as we're humans, we're bound to have selfish motives. I, Zhang Feng, am not a saint either. I also have my own selfish motives. My selfish motives are to allow the people I like, the people I care about, the people who care about me, the people who like me, my brothers and family members to live a safe and stable life. That's all. But there is a limit. That is, I can't bear to see others suffer. You are all my students, Zhang Feng. Then we are family. If I, Zhang Feng, can't even fill your stomachs, then I will feel ashamed if you call me a teacher. I will feel ashamed. And you also have family, and your family may be starving at this time. So I was thinking, since you are all my students, all my family, then why should I be so secretive? In fact, if you have the slightest interest in this thing, you will definitely recognize many things from Li Gan and the others' introduction. That's right. Many of the things in this experiment are things that you have seen in books before. You should be familiar with this thing, right? At this moment, all the students were in an uproar. Immediately, there was a tsunami of cheers. Chapter 1445. Zhang Feng was not wrong. The reason why Zhang Feng chose to make it public was not only to win over the hearts of the people, but also to popularize the phosphate fertilizer as soon as possible. More importantly, it was because of the incident with Qian Wanli. Although many people did not say it out loud, A seed had already been planted in their hearts. What Zhang Feng wanted to do was to take advantage of this opportunity to completely wipe out this seed in the cradle. After all, this thing was a disaster. There was no way to give the students a sense of security in the academy. How could the students completely open their hearts? This operation was effective in an instant. Although Zhang Feng did not know for the time being whether these people really understood and opened their hearts or not, at least at this moment, he could feel that the series of factors caused by Qian Wanli's incident had all disappeared. At this moment, Yu Shernan and the others were also a little shocked. The things that Zhang Feng said were actually recorded in the book. But today, even he could not understand Zhang Feng's words at this time. What on earth did Zhang Feng do? Let alone Li Shimin. But at this time, seeing that the students of the academy were so excited, they could not say anything and could only let Zhang Feng fool around. After all, overall, the haze caused by Qian Wanli had disappeared at this time. At this time, Zhang Feng continued. In fact, what I want to say is that none of us are saints. We just want to use our own strength to make everyone live a better life. We all have families, neighbors, brothers, and friends. When we are full, do we have to watch them starve too? This is not something that we should do. I'll make it clear here first. If anyone dares to do this, no matter what official rank you are, Lao Tzu will find a way to get you down. A person who does not even have the basic filial piety and conscience does not deserve to be an official at all. Although these are two different things, they are actually the same thing. How can a person who does not even have the basic principles of being an official? An official is also a muddle-headed official. Today this phosphate fertilizer, you all saw it. This is a gift that I, Zhang Feng, want to protect the people I want to protect. I don't care if the world doubts this thing at this time or what, but since I have made it today, I will provide it to you for free at the first time. When it is time for autumn planting, I will give you a holiday. During autumn planting, no matter the official rank, there would be a few days of holiday. This was a law set by the current emperor to encourage agriculture. But as for the academy, although there were no clear rules, basically, no one had set a precedent. Today, Zhang Feng's words. It was not because of anything else. They were all commoners from the bottom rung of society. At this time, they came to the academy to learn the most advanced and awesome things that everyone else had to look up to. Their dean was the youngest Confucian scholar and the person who was most likely to surpass Wei Zheng's existence. Everyone in the world thought that he was a person who was more accomplished than the godly Dr. Sun Simiao. This was why the 6 Confucian scholars were willing to come to the academy. What was the reason for this? It was not because of a few jars of wine, nor was it because Zhang Feng was thick-skinned, nor was it because they were after Zhang Feng's little bit of salary. It was mainly because of the teaching philosophy on the academy, as well as the feeling of awe that everyone felt when they saw the white deer college uniform. It was the simple and unadorned kind that Zhang Feng said. That's right. Zhang Feng said so much. He said so much in every speech. It was just to explain one thing. Don't forget your roots. Forgetting one's roots was an extremely terrifying thing. At this time, among the 3,000 students, some seemed to have thought of this point. However, most of them were immersed in Zhang Feng's impassioned speech and were unable to extricate themselves. At this time, Ma Zhou and the others were so emotional that they bowed deeply. When Li Chengqian and the others saw this, although they did not want to, they still bowed with them. With this bow, all the students began to follow suit. When Zhang Feng saw this, he waved his hand slightly and said, "All of you, get up. There's no need to do this. I'm giving you a break, but there's a condition. The condition is that you have to work in the fields personally. When the time comes, I'll give you an assignment. It can be considered an assessment for this semester." Li Shimin could not help but look at Zhang Feng with some surprise. He asked, "What kind of assessment are you planning? Don't tell me you want them to work in the fields?" Zhang Feng nodded and said, "That's right. I've come up with a poem. Today, I'll give it to all of you." Hoeing crops at noon, sweat dripping down to the soil. Who knows that every grain of rice on the plate is laborious? Only when you truly realize how difficult it is to obtain these grains, will you know how to walk your own path in the future. Even the current emperor, from what I know, will personally work in the fields in the imperial manor on Longzhou Mountain, let alone all of you? Don't tell me you feel that your status is more noble than the emperor. Today, I'm giving you an assignment. From tomorrow onwards, every one of you will have to choose a piece of land on the mountain. The size of the land will depend on you. But this piece of land must be personally planted by you. Do not count on others. And from today onwards, whether you want to eat meat or soil on the mountain, that will depend on you. The things that you plant, the livestock that you breed, will all need to be reported to the kitchen. Then, every year, according to your income from that year, the standard of your meals will be determined. Of course, these things that are produced will all be returned to the kitchen. This matter, I'll leave it to do Dabing. Chapter 1446. In an instant. All the students were in an uproar. In their cognition, studying was the most noble thing. But why did studying become so cheap here? Moreover, they had to plant food by themselves. Although these things were not a big deal for most of the students, for some of them who had been spoiled since childhood, it was uncomfortable. For example, do go. For example, Li Chengqian and the others. At this moment, they were all frowning. For example, Ouying Sun, on the other hand, laughed loudly and said, "All of you must remember clearly what the dean has said today. Of course, the academy will pay for all the seeds and fertilizers. As for those of you who don't know how to grow crops, I have 2 suggestions here. First, voluntarily withdraw from the academy. My academy will write a document, and on this document, it will state that you all don't know how to grow crops and won't write anything else. As for the second, that is to ask the students around you and humbly ask for advice. If you don't know how hard it is to get the food on the plate, how will you know how hard it is to get the Tang dynasty in the future? In the future, no matter what you do, it will be closely related to the academy. Although the academy has given you glory and let you be arrogant in Chang'an City, don't forget that it is the academy that has given you this. The academy has the right to withdraw it. It can do so at any time. And everything the dean said today is to remind you of one thing, that is, don't forget your original intention. This is a guiding stone that will determine how far you can go in the future. Only with it in your hands, you will not lose yourself in sensual pleasures." Zhang Feng's words were a little harsh today. However, Zhang Feng had thought about it before he came. In fact, he had wanted to do this for a long time. The reason why he bought so much land this time was also for a purpose. Want him to plant food? Are you kidding me? Would he plant food? This time, he spent so much money to buy the land because of the phosphate fertilizer and the students on the mountain. After all, they were only the first batch of students, and there would be many more in the future. These things were actually for the world to see. One had to know that at this time, everyone was waiting for Zhang Feng's answer. They were also feeling ashamed of the pair of hands behind his back. This was Zhang Feng's explanation to the people of the world, which was also his attitude. Those who follow me will always have meat to eat. Those who don't follow me, you can just drool. The lecture time was more than the experiment time. After Zhang Feng finished talking about these things, only Li Chengqian and the others were left to perform. They performed the experiment while explaining the theory of the experiment to the students. As for Zhang Feng, after his speech, he slipped away under the eager gazes of the students. Li Shen's, one of the 2 compassionate peasants, was the only one left. After that, Li Shimin personally wrote the poem. After that, he laughed and left with Yu Shernan and the others. The matter had already ended. If they stayed here, it would only increase the pressure in the hearts of the students. They went directly to Zhang Feng's villa together. Zhang Feng's door was wide open. He seemed to have expected that they would follow. At this time, even the tea had been poured and he was waiting for them. As soon as they entered the room, Zhang Feng said, "Let's make it clear first. This matter is my personal decision. It is also my decision as the dean. There is no room for negotiation." Zhang Feng had to give them a heads up first. Although he didn't know what they would ask, Zhang Feng's intuition told him that these people would definitely ask all kinds of reasons for doing so. It was not that Zhang Feng didn't want to say. They asked because they were too lazy to say. As for why the academy, for the first time, let the students participate in the matter of eating in the future, in fact, Zhang Feng himself didn't know. Although it was said that it was there, Zhang Feng just wanted to slow down. There were too many things in the past 2 days. In addition, Zhang Feng had to think about the promotion and production of this phosphate fertilizer. Therefore, Zhang Feng's head really hurt at this time. If it wasn't because Lao Li wanted to see Zhang Feng do the experiment, Zhang Feng would really be too lazy to do it. At this time, he just wanted to cover his head and have a good sleep. But obviously, Li Shimin and the others didn't take his words seriously. Hearing Zhang Feng's words, Li Shimin laughed. He took out Zhang Feng's poem and said, "Did you just compose this again? Or did you already think about it?" Zhang Feng's expression froze and said, "It's just a casual remark. How can I be so awesome to think about it in advance?" Yu Shernan and the others had always felt that Zhang Feng seemed to have been prepared for this. At this time when they heard him say this, they were a little annoyed and said, "So you mean that everyone in the world is inferior to you?" Zhang Feng was sweating profusely in an instant. This was copying someone else's poem. Why did he need to think for so long? Wasn't it something that could be done easily? Moreover, this poem was in the future. Which one of them, from 70 to 80 years old to 5 or 6 years old children, did not know how to memorize a few poems? This was the simplest of them. No, Mr. Bosher, you think too much. This poem was actually written by my feelings. It's not a good poem. It can only be considered a limerick. When he said this, Yu Shernan's expression became even worse. He slammed the table and said, "So you mean that we don't even have the right to write in the future?" Chapter 1447. Zhang Feng instantly felt that this might be a conspiracy. This was definitely a conspiracy. Otherwise, why would nothing happen to him when he had created so many poems? Why would such a big thing happen now? There was definitely a conspiracy. Otherwise, why would he make such a big fuss over this matter? Moreover, it was with so many people, as if they had discussed it beforehand. When Zhang Feng thought of this, he was furious. He glanced at the old scholar. At this time, the old scholar was actually not speaking up for him. Zhang Feng was a little speechless. He said, "Actually, there is still some truth to this matter." "What is going on?" "Actually, I am just expressing my feelings. I am not targeting anyone. You have also seen how big of a mess this phosphate fertilizer matter has caused. I just want to do something meaningful. At the very least, before the locusts arrive next year, every household will be able to save up some food. Otherwise, if they say it's someone else, even I won't be able to fight back. You have also seen it. For the past few years, I have almost exhausted all my savings to get this little bit of food. If you are talking about the future, then how can I? Where will I get food from in the future and next year? This year, the Great Tang has practically emptied itself out in order to barely keep the mouths of the people shut. What about next year? The most important thing is that if I don't do something next year, not to mention the common people, even those in the imperial court who don't know their place and don't like the academy will hit us when we are down. The common people are the scariest when they are hungry. Therefore, in order to avoid unnecessary trouble, I said the ugly words. I can't command others, but there are more than 3,000 students in the academy, which means more than 3,000 families. These people are walking signboards. Once their families accept the phosphate fertilizer, what do you think the people, their neighbors, their relatives will think? Before this, our academy's reputation has always been very good. That's why I thought of this. This is also the last trump card I can use now. Once this trump card is used, the phosphor fertilizer matter is basically settled. Zhang Feng chose to surrender directly. At this time, no matter how much he said to these people, it would be nonsense. The only way was to tell the main reason for this matter. Otherwise, these old foxes would definitely find out every little detail of his background clearly. Instead of this, Zhang Feng might as well tell them all his plans. At least, Li Shimin, Wei Zhang, Zhang Sun Wuji, and the others listened and nodded repeatedly. Yu Shernan, Xiaocai, and the others were also bursting with joy. On the contrary, Ouying Sun pointed out of the window and said, "Fengzi, what you said is right. But have you thought about it? This mountain is only so big. Apart from the residential areas and some important places, where else can people grow crops? Besides, even if there is, have you thought about it? There are more than 3,000 students, plus the handymen on the mountain and so on. There are about 4,000 people altogether. Even if each person has 1 mu of land, where do you plan to let these people go and grow crops?" Ahem. Yu Qigong coughed and looked at Zhang Feng strangely. This kid just spent hundreds of thousands of taels of silver to buy a large piece of land. Before, I did not know that although this kid is greedy for money, he is not a person who likes to grow crops. Now I understand that this kid is playing this game. This time, Yu Shernan and the others finally understood. This bastard, So he was prepared long ago. But even so, Ouyang Soon still asked with a gloomy face. Even so, I want to ask, what is this academy of yours for? The academy is supposed to focus on the students' studies. But what about you? You spend all your time learning this and that, but in the end, you want the students to go to the fields to grow crops? If you really want to do this, then do we have to go to the fields to work? However, Zhang Feng said uncertainly, No, that's not what I meant. In fact, to put it bluntly, I'm doing this to show the potential of the agricultural course. Although there was an agricultural course at the beginning, there has never been any practical development. So I want to use this matter to show the potential of the agricultural course. Ouyang Soon was shocked when he heard this. But he also thought of this point. When they first vacated the farm and turned it into an incubation garden, they realized this point. However, Zhang Feng never said anything. In the incubation garden, after some things were planted on the day of the autumn planting ceremony, there was no movement at all. So they did not have any other thoughts. But at this time, they did not expect that Zhang Feng was still thinking about this. Not only that, he had just bought so much land. How could this make Ouyang Soon and the others feel better? The academy. It was a place that taught people to be kind. But what about Zhang Feng? He actually treated it as a place where he only cared about himself and did whatever he wanted. How could this be? Then, Ouyang Soon pulled Li Gang and the old village chief, and the other two fiercely criticized Zhang Feng. This made Zhang Feng even more depressed. Damn it, what was wrong with today? Did they eat gunpowder? Chapter 1448. Zhang Feng did not understand. As a big agricultural country, this matter should be the most important thing. But why was it that when it came to this place, it made these lords so angry? Moreover, this thing, to put it bluntly, there was a work-study system in the later generations, not to mention the later generations. In the later generations, didn't people from all walks of life have to go back to their villages to work during the autumn planting every year? What was wrong with this? Besides, there were almost 5,000 people on the mountain, which meant that there were more than 5,000 mouths. This did not include the people in the market at the foot of the mountain. If the people in the paper mill, food factory, rubber factory, and so on were counted, there would be a total of 6,000 people. These 6,000 people were equivalent to more than 6,000 mouths. The current situation was that even if the academy was not short of money, it was impossible to buy food with money. Looking at the whole Tang dynasty, which family had more food now? It was not common to rely only on buying food. They had to come up with a long-term plan, which was to grow their own food. Thinking of this, Zhang Feng looked at them carefully. Seeing that they seemed to have a lot of questions, he smiled and said, Dear masters, look at the current situation on Mount Shao. Including the students of the academy, the handymen, the craftsmen, and the recruited refugees, there are at least 6,000 or 7,000 people on Mount Shao. There are so many mouths waiting for me to eat. Even though I have many wonderful ideas and can find money, there is a saying that goes, help the needy, not the poor. Right now, I can still count on my own business to buy more food, but you can see the current situation. How much food is left for us to buy? It's okay for a few years, but what about next year? What about after the famine year next year? This is not a long-term plan. Besides, even if I can do business now and the business on the mountain is still okay, but these things are just small businesses. Do you think that ordinary people really know how to do business? The business skills that I have written, let alone the students, even those who are doing it, old you may not know some of the twists and turns in it, let alone the refugees who rely on the academy. Still the same question, can ordinary people really make money? I don't think so. Relying on one's strength to earn money and relying on the heavens to eat will never lead to success. Moreover, these methods will never be as effective as using one's brain to earn money. For example, my esteemed self, just how many of the people of the Great Tang know how to observe when the Zhuang family needs fertilizer? When is the right time to irrigate? Just by looking at the appearance of the farmers, can you tell if the farmers lack any fertilizer? No. Zhang Feng said with some grief and indignation. They only know how to follow the natural laws of heaven and earth. When they plant crops, they have to wait until it rains. Then they have to fertilize the farmers in the field and then remove the weeds. How ridiculous is this? Can the seeds really germinate? Do the Zhuang family's grain really need some fertilizer? Don't these farmers to say they lack of fertilizer? Do they know all these? I believe, not to mention others, I think most of us here don't know these things. The old Xiaocai looked at Zhang Feng with shock and said, Then you said so much, is it because you want everyone on Shao Mountain to learn to read, not just the children in the academy? I want to try. Zhang Feng nodded heavily and said, When I opened the academy, I told you, old Xiaocai, and I also told you, Lao Li, that I don't care how many people I can make literate. I don't have the ability to make all the people in the world learn to read, and I don't have the power to do so. I just feel that I have to give the people I want a better life, that's all. The old Xiaocai was shocked by Zhang Feng's words and shook his head. Fengzi, your idea is really good, but have you thought about it? These people are refugees and farmers who have no knowledge at all. How can they understand this knowledge? Even if you really want to teach them now, have you thought about it? The first thing these people want when they wake up every morning is to go somewhere to earn some money for breakfast. Every day when they go to sleep, they think about how they can bear the burden of a grudge between a penny and a penny today. Moreover, as the saying goes, a gentleman works his mind while a villain works his body. If you only pick a dozen or 100 people, it may be possible. But if you want to teach everyone on Shao Mountain, not to mention you, even Confucius couldn't do it if I wanted to see it. Teacher Wen nodded and said, Young friend Zhang Feng, I can understand your thoughts, but Brother Zihuai is right. Every day, these people think about how to make the farmers in the fields take more and less spoil, and pray that God will pity them. How can they have the time to think so much? I know you want to do the best for the world, but there has to be a limit. It has to be done step by step. Immediately, Yu Shernan and the others, including Wei Zhang and the others, nodded and agreed with Li Gang's words. Looking at everyone's shocking appearance, Zhang Feng suddenly realized that he seemed to be talking to a chicken and a duck. Thinking of this, Zhang Feng waved his hand and stopped the crowd. Stop, I have something to say. Chapter 1449. In fact, Zhang Feng could understand these things after thinking about it. After all, Zhang Feng, who came from the future, had a deep-rooted understanding that anyone could study. According to his understanding, anyone could study. Even the lowliest commoner had the right to study. Moreover, they also had the possibility to become the pillars of the country. If Zhang Feng were to talk about these historical figures, he might not be able to explain them clearly even if he spent 3 days and 3 nights talking about them. However, Yu Shernan and the others had a completely different understanding. Zhang Feng could see in their eyes that a scholar was a scholar and a commoner should be a commoner. This was the understanding engraved in the bones of the people of this era. In the beginning, when Zhang Feng opened the academy, they had opposed it. However, at that time, Zhang Feng opened the academy and it was considered orthodox. Therefore, although Yu Shernan and the others were not happy, they could accept it. But now, Zhang Feng actually wanted to teach the commoners on the mountain. This difficulty, in their eyes, was tantamount to reaching the sky. Only those who were born with a prominent family, some good bloodline, and those who had the inheritance of a powerful family could become talents. However, these were not a problem for Zhang Feng. Even at this moment, in front of the teaching building, Ma Zhou and a few other commoners were talking about the magical knowledge of physics to the students of the academy. However, Yu Shernan and the others seemed to have some resistance in their hearts. This might have a lot to do with this era. In this era, commoners usually referred to people like Prince Consort Zhou and Chu Jun Lai Ji. However, in the future, commoners included the poor. In the beginning of the Tang dynasty, commoners were only compared to those who were not from the noble families, such as the families of merchants and so on. Only those who had some basic conditions could be called commoners. In fact, this was very easy to understand. If you could not eat, how would you have the time to read and learn? For these people, there was only one evaluation for them: reading. Were they worthy? There was no good or evil in people who had such an idea. It was a deep-rooted way of thinking, just like Zhang Feng's idea that everyone was equal and everyone could read. No one would think that people who had such an idea were evil or good. Zhang Feng also knew that there was no need to argue about these things. Even if they argued for 3 days and 3 nights, there would be no conclusion. In the face of inherent thinking, there was really nothing to say. Therefore, Zhang Feng sighed and said, "Teachers, this must be a road that you can't walk on, right?" When Yu Shernan and the others heard this, they could not help but choose to remain silent. Even Li Shimin sighed and didn't say anything. At this moment, Zhang Feng looked at the crowd and said, "But if you don't even have the courage to try, how can you succeed? If I am to truly succeed this time around, Then, esteemed teachers, think about it. What sort of sensational effect will these 1,000+ people bring? First of all, these people can read and know what should be planted first in their crops, when there is a shortage of water, when there is a lack of fertilizer, when the roots of the crops are eaten by insects, and this is not the most important thing. When they can really read and write, won't it be better for them to do business in their leisure time? For example, they only know how to collect a little scattered copper coins. In their knowledge, they only know how to install things. What if someone gives them an ingot of silver? What will they do? This is a kind of knowledge. It has nothing to do with the skills of merchants. It is to teach them how to calculate. You have seen that now that the waterway trade route has been opened, coupled with the trade with Jinla, as long as we take down the trade center of Chotsi City this time, more merchants from the western regions will flock to Chang'an City. What kind of place is Chang'an? This is the center of the entire Tang dynasty and the center of power of the entire Tang dynasty. It is a place that will be worshipped by all countries in the future. If outsiders know that the people in Chang'an City are illiterate and don't know how to do business, what will it be? It will be a disgrace to the Tang dynasty. It will be a disgrace to those of us who promote the culture of the Tang dynasty and let the people in the world learn and use it. Not to mention other places, even in Chang'an City, he can't make some people literate. What will the merchants and the people who come to pay tribute to the Tang dynasty think? What will His Majesty think? Is this what he thinks? Are we doing something useless that will smear the name of the great Tang? And even if His Majesty doesn't say this, as scholars, don't we feel ashamed to face the world and the sages? Chapter 1450. After Zhang Feng said this, he still maintained his smile. This was the first time he felt humiliated. The people present were basically the top figures of this era, but at this moment, they were looking at him as if he was a monster deep in thought. Because of this, Zhang Feng felt that he had to maintain his smile and create an image of himself being very awesome and mysterious. The weather was still gradually turning cold. The birds in the sky, accompanied by the falling leaves, swirled and fell from the sky. At this moment, the entire Guangzhou area had already fallen into a beautiful picture of autumn planting. Although at this time, the government and White Deer College came out to distribute the few selected seeds, there were still very few people who could afford to buy them. Except for the people of the Tang dynasty in the area of Shao Mountain, at this time, basically all the people in ragged clothes were wandering on the mountain path from time to time, wanting to see if there would be any good news from the mountain, or if someone would suddenly say that the mountain would give them free seeds and food and other wonderful things. It seemed that in their memory, White Deer College still had the impression of opening the granary to provide relief to the victims of the famine a few years ago. Although the imperial court had already announced that this year's autumn planting grain would be distributed one by one according to the usual grain price, the grain was precious. If they could get some grain from Shao Mountain now, wouldn't they be able to get more grain this year and have more harvest next year? There were quite a few people who had such a beautiful dream. At this time, at the foot of the ruined mountain, countless people were watching. They were squatting on the ridges beside the fields, or looking at the black satin road that they had never seen before. On the mountain, in the farm hatchery, Ma Zhou was excitedly pulled over by Li Chengqian and the others. Although he was ordered to farm by his father when he was on Longsho Mountain and when he worshipped heaven, those were just to fool the eyes of the officials. How could he have the chance to work in the field personally? At this moment, Li Chengqian had demonstrated his prowess in front of everyone in the academy. He had experimented more than 10 times in a row. If not for the lack of phosphor stones, he might have continued his experiments. As soon as the class ended, Li Chengqian, Cheng Chumo, and the others dragged Ma Zhou, Lai Ji, and the others over. As soon as he entered the door, he saw old Gao squinting his eyes. There was a teapot beside his hand. He was lying on a recliner made of bamboo and waving a Buddha whisk made of long and thin bamboo poles and palm leaves from time to time. It was as if they were trying to scare away the wild animals that dared to come to the fields for food. However, under the seemingly mighty Buddha whisk, a few Luhua chickens were clucking, leading a group of their offsprings to dig for food in the field. Even the group of chicks chirped and ran to old Gao's shoes, lying down and taking a nap. It seemed that old Gao's shoes were very comfortable and warm, far warmer than the cold ground. A pair of yellow citrons with tender lips would jump out of old Gao's exposed ankles from time to time. In the distance, a black pig with black skin was humming as it plowed out beautiful scrolls in the field, and then elegantly nested in them and fell asleep comfortably. From time to time, it would hum twice, as if it was sleeping very comfortably. The arrival of Li Chengqian was undoubtedly the chief culprit who broke this temporary tranquility. as soon as they arrived. First of all, the pig groaned and woke up in an instant. It rolled a few times before it struggled to get up from the gully. Then, the chicken flapped its wings and clucked to call its offspring. And Old Gao was also awakened by this harmonious sound. Old Gao was first startled by the sound of chickens and pigs in the field, and then he fiercely waved the bamboo pole in his hand and angrily chased away these culprits. They were driven out of the field. Damn animals, sooner or later Lao Tzu will kill you and eat you. Old Gao scolded as he held the frightened chick at his feet in his hand, touched it, and then put it on his shoulder. Then he hurriedly came to Li Chengqian, bowed and said, "So it's young Master Li? May I know why young Master Li is here?" Li Chengqian looked at the terrible experimental field, and then looked at Old Gao with a strange expression and said, "Old Gao, we're here for nothing else. We just want to farm. If you have nothing to do, you can go and do your thing. We'll also take a look at the field that Fengzi planted before." Old Gao felt a little incredulous. The Crown Prince was going to farm in person? He hurriedly asked, "Young Master Li, does President Zhang know that you're here? If he didn't ask us to come, do you think we would come? And in the future, if it's not us, all the students in the academy will have to farm." What? This time, Old Gao was instantly dumbfounded. But he didn't dare to ask the Crown Prince. He hurriedly pulled Ma Zhou and asked, "Tell me, are you sure this is Fengzi's idea?" Ma Zhou nodded and said seriously, "This is indeed what the dean said in front of Mr. Boucher and all the students just now." Old Gao's face instantly changed when he heard this, and he exclaimed, "Ah, things are not good." Chapter 1451. After Old Gao exclaimed, he hurriedly ran out of the door. Perhaps he was going to find Zhang Feng to ask about this matter. After all, the people standing in front of him were the crown prince of the imperial court and the heirs of the various dukes. These people were here to farm? Wasn't this a joke? Once this matter was heard by the people in the imperial court, it would cause turmoil in the imperial court. He had to be careful. At this moment, even the few of them did not dare to greet him and hurriedly ran away. Li Chengqian and the others were stunned. What's going on? Ma Zhou also did not understand the situation. He scratched his head and said, "Why don't we go inside and take a look at the things that the dean personally planted, and then we'll get a bunch of them next to his field?" Li Chengqian heard this and nodded. After all, this was the first time he was so excited and could not wait to do something. Cheng Chumo clenched his fists and looked left and right. He went into the first floor of the gray building. In an instant, a series of angry roars of pigs and shrill screams rang out. After a moment, Cheng Chumo came out with a pile of farm tools. However, at this moment, his white and blue robe was stained with a lot of pig dung. In an instant, Zhang Sun and the others pinched their noses in disdain. Cheng Chumo was so angry that he threw away the hoe in his hand and angrily sat down where Old Gao had just sat. Seeing this, Ma Zhou rolled his eyes and said, "Young Master Li, my teacher has said that this experimental field is an extremely important place for our academy. Moreover, my teacher has also said that everything here is confidential. If it were not for the fact that you are old acquaintances of the headmaster, I would not dare to bring you here without my teacher's permission. Young Master Li, shall we begin?" Li Chengqian glanced at Cheng Chumo and then nodded with a smile. "Then I'll have to trouble Brother Ma." Immediately, Ma Zhou and the others picked up the farm tools from the ground and then led Li Chengqian into the hatchery. At this time, although there were pigs, chickens, ducks, birds, mice, and so on in the hatchery, generally speaking, it was okay. At this time, the wheat field that Zhang Feng, Li Chengqian, and Cheng Chumo were farming had already been sprinkled with a thin layer of pot-bottom ash. Cheng Chumo and the others didn't care about other things, but this was something that they had personally farmed. Moreover, it was a product that was mixed with phosphate fertilizer, so they were naturally very attentive. When they saw the appearance of the field, they couldn't help but feel a little confused. Li Chengqian pointed at the ashes at the bottom of the pot in the field and asked, "Brother Ma, what is the meaning of this?" Ma Zhou didn't know what this meant, nor did he know what was going on. He said in surprise, "I don't know either, but this piece of land was taken care of by my teacher personally, so there are some things that I really don't know. However, I feel that since the dean wants to do this, he naturally has his reasons. Otherwise, why would the dean bring this thing here? And as far as I know, these things are only used when planting." Cheng Chumo put his hands on his waist and squeezed through the crowd. He looked at the ashes in the field and said, "Previously, Fengzi wrapped the seeds with a layer of this stuff, saying that it can repel insects. This seems to be repellent to insects too, right? As he spoke, Chung Chumo carefully threw away a little bit of the soil at the edge of the field. However, when he threw away the soil in his hands, he instantly saw a few tender yellow sprouts fluttering in the wind. Li Chengqian also asked in surprise, "These are the sprouts of wheat? The wheat sprouted so quickly?" Cheng Chumo was a little confused. Didn't they just plant it for a little more than 10 days? Logically speaking, the wheat shouldn't have sprouted at this time. And now, as you can see, some of the fields haven't been planted yet, and some of them are still uncultivated. Could it be the effect of the phosphate fertilizer? Hiss. When Du Go and the others heard this, they instantly sucked in a breath of cold air. Immediately after, Li Chengqian hurriedly dug up a pile of soil and held the sprouted wheat seed in his hands, carefully examining it. The sprouts of the wheat seed were less than the height of a finger joint, but compared to the wheat seeds they saw before, they were much more robust. At this time, the wheat seed was still wrapped in a layer of black ash. Cheng Chumo didn't believe in heresy. He turned around and dug a few times in the field that the students planted before. Not to mention that the things in the field were still the same. Some of the seeds had actually started to rot after being soaked in the water. Some of the seeds were even badly damaged by the insects in the ground. Upon closer inspection, one would discover that some of the more plump seeds had some tender yellow marks at the tip of the seeds. However, in comparison, it wasn't difficult to tell which seeds were better and which were worse. Li Chengqian looked at the seeds in his hands and in Cheng Chumo's hands. His heart was already in turmoil. This thing's terrifying side could be seen at this time. What about in the future? All of this was phosphate fertilizer. Previously, they were still wondering if this phosphate fertilizer would be effective. However, when Cheng Chumo carelessly tossed it down, they instantly discovered the difference. This gave Li Chengqian hope. Li Chengqian carefully shook the seeds in Cheng Chumo's hands into his own, then said in a trembling voice, "You guys do it first, I'll go find Fengzi and my father." Chapter 1452. At the same time, in Zhang Feng's villa, the debate was still going on. Yu Shernan and the others' point of view was that it was fine for ordinary people. Those who were below the age of 20 still had spiritual energy. If they were to learn at this age, they could still make up for it. However, how were they going to teach people above the age of 20? Moreover, who was going to teach these people? It was all a matter of time and money. Who had the time? It was better to teach the students in the academy. It was better than anything else. Li Shimin also felt that this made sense. After all, how could those fools teach them how to read and read? If they all went to study, what would happen to the farmers in the fields? If everyone in the world yearned for it, wouldn't all the farmers in the world be left barren? When Zhang Feng saw this, he couldn't take it anymore. He said, "Lao Li, what do you mean by this? Although these people are a little stupid, their thinking is deeply ingrained. We're just teaching them some basic knowledge. Words will do. We're not asking them to take the imperial examinations. What are you afraid of?" Li Shimin waved his hand and said with a serious expression, "You're wrong about that. We know what you mean. This is a good thing. You're really thinking about the people. However, have you thought about it? At this time, everyone is thinking about how to fill their stomachs. Where would they have the time to do such trivial things? Fengzi, we all know what you're planning. However, you're being a little rash. You're planning to teach these people on the mountain because they're your neighbors and you can't bring yourself to do it." When Zhang Feng heard this, he thought about it and didn't refute. After all, Lao Li was right. However, at this moment, Zhang Feng thought about it and suddenly said, "I say, we're talking about the students of the academy going to work in the fields. Why are we talking so far away? Later, I'll list out my plan. When the time comes, you'll understand when you see it. Do you have to talk about it for so long?" "No." Xue Ji, who had not spoken much, said faintly, "I have been thinking about this for a long time, but I still think it is impossible. Even if it is what you said, it is easy to let the students of the academy go to the foot of the mountain to teach the people. It is actually very difficult to do it. I think this matter should be delayed. At the very least, I have to wait until you take out." Zhang Feng had long been annoyed. He seriously suspected that the reason why so many people were saying so much today was to make him back off. To put it bluntly, they just didn't want the students to farm. This kind of thing had never happened before. Moreover, the current situation was that they did not even have enough food to plant the seeds. How could they have the ability to get the academy to take out so much food in an instant? Do the students of the academy still need to eat? Zhang Feng was very clear about this. At this moment, he smiled slightly and said, "Actually, I understand your thoughts and intentions. You're just worried that the food in our academy is not enough, right?" Yu Shernan revealed an expression that said, "At least you know what's good for you. Now, you don't have any reason to persist, right? What you want to do can be done, but you have to wait until after this year. That is to say, you have to wait until this season's harvest. If it is really as you said, that the world can have enough food and clothing, then you can go and do it. The people, when there is no livelihood crisis at this time, no matter what you do, they will approve of you. As for now," Shueji lit a cigarette as he spoke and said, "Now, let's think about the phosphate fertilizer. Also, I just heard from Lao Li that you have already asked people to buy land. Now, listen to me and sell all the land. We are the academy. The academy is a place to teach and educate people. Moreover, the identity of a student is also there. If you do so, then the people in Shandong, the people in the imperial court who don't like you, and the person hiding behind you, will definitely not let go of such an opportunity." Dean. At this moment, Old Gao's voice sounded at Zhang Feng's door. Zhang Feng also took the opportunity to hurriedly open the door and stop this topic. As soon as he opened the door, Old Gao was also shocked. He habitually bowed down and was about to bow down, but he was caught by Zhang Feng and said in horror, "Old Gao, what's wrong with you? Why did you bow to me as soon as you came in?" Old Gao looked at Zhang Feng and then looked at Li Shimin behind him. Seeing Li Shimin's eyes, he suddenly understood. He stood up and said, "I want to ask you something. You have to tell me honestly." Seeing Old Gao like this, Zhang Feng hurriedly said, "Go ahead. Are you going to let young Master Li and the other students of the academy go to farm?" Zhang Feng nodded and said, "I do have such a plan. This is also the reason why I set up the agricultural product incubation garden. Is there a problem?" Seeing this, Old Gao was relieved and said, "Then it's okay. Just now, young Master Li and Ma Zhou went to the incubation garden and said that they were going to farm. I still didn't dare to believe it. You said before that no one is allowed to enter that place, but young Master Li's status is different, so I came to ask. Fengzi." At this moment, Li Chengqian waved his hands and came from afar. Looking at Zhang Feng at the door, he couldn't help shouting, "Fengzi, you're out. You're out." Zhang Feng's expression froze. Li Shimin and the others were also slightly stunned when they heard this. They looked at each other and then hurried to the door. Looking at Li Chengqian, Li Shimin scolded, "What happened? How can you be so improper?" Seeing this, Li Chengqian waved his hands and said, "The wheat that Fengzi personally planted has sprouted." Chapter 1453. This time, Li Shimin and the rest could no longer sit still. The wheat sprouted? How could it be so fast? How long had it been? Now, from the bottom of the mountain to the top of the mountain, so much land was empty. There were even many people waiting for the seeds. And Zhang Feng's wheat sprouted? Did it have to be so fast? And most importantly, the wheat had only been planted for 10 days. It sprouted so quickly? One had to know that if the wheat was planted in the ground, it would take at most half a month for it to sprout, okay? Could it be that this was the effect of the phosphate fertilizer? Just as everyone was anticipating, Li Chengqian had already rushed over. Li Shimin couldn't wait to step forward and open Li Chengqian's hand. In Li Chengqian's hand, the wheat on his left hand already had a fingernail-high sprout. And on his right hand, it was the normal wheat, shriveled. Some had already withered. There were even some wheat that had been bitten by insects and rats until it was incomplete. Only an extremely small number of wheat had traces of tender white sprouts at the top. Looking at the seeds on Li Chengqian's left hand, which were full of tender yellow sprouts, they were still growing healthily. And most importantly, besides being slightly moist, the layer of ash on the seeds was still there. Li Shimin gently peeled off the ashes from the bottom of the pot. Not only were the seeds still plump, they were even more robust. In an instant, Li Shimin couldn't help but peel off the seeds in Li Chengqian's hand, revealing the plump seeds within. Wei Zhang, Yu Shernan and the rest also gathered around, staring at the seeds in Li Chengqian's hand with eyes full of shock. In an instant, the difference between those that had been filtered and those that hadn't. Needless to say, everyone could see it clearly. Li Shimin turned to look at Zhang Feng. Seeing that he seemed to be fine, he asked, "Fengzi, this thing of yours, did you use something else?" Zhang Feng shrugged and said, "This is the power of knowledge. Actually, Mr. Bo Shi and the rest saw it at that time. I just filtered the seeds and then wrapped them with a layer of ash. The rest, I just used some phosphate fertilizer. That's all." This time, Li Shimin was really shocked. Wei Zhang and the rest also looked at Zhang Feng with eyes full of surprise. In their knowledge, the seeds in Li Chengqian's right hand were the most normal. The seeds that had sprouted in his left hand, they had never seen them before. Most importantly, it was hard to say whether Zhang Feng had really used something else. At this time, everyone looked at Yu Shernan and the rest with a questioning look. Seeing this, Yu Shernan was also a little surprised and said, "This thing." Old man did see everything with his own eyes. The water was indeed taken from the stream. There was nothing different about it. "What?" Li Shimin exclaimed in shock. Just a little bit of ash from the bottom of the pot could have such a magical effect? Then in the past in all the fields there were people who burned a lot of ash. How could there be so many insects? But Yi Miao had never seen such a strong one before? Could it be? Was this the problem of the seeds? Fengzi, tell me honestly, did you really select these seeds and then they will become like this? Zhang Feng shook his head and said somewhat speechlessly, "I have said that this is the power of knowledge. You don't believe me. Fine, I am too lazy to waste my saliva. If you believe me, then do as I say. I promise that all your food this year will be doubled." After saying that, Zhang Feng put his hands behind his back and walked into the villa slowly. Lying on the stool in the villa's living room, he closed his eyes and rested. Seeing this, Li Shimin gritted his teeth. This guy was definitely taking revenge on them for making things difficult for him just now. Otherwise, why would he be like this? At this time, the few of them had no choice but to call Cheng Chumo and the others over. Together with Yu Shernan, they carefully asked about everything that had happened in the field back then. The only thing left was to drag them to the fields to work on it personally. Li Shimin couldn't be blamed. After all, this seemingly simple but miraculous operation was really refreshing. Not to mention other things. However, it was such a simple move. It had only been 10 days. Comparing the two, there were already such significant results. What would happen in the future? Or the whole land of the Tang dynasty? What would happen if this method was used? Would it really be like what Zhang Feng said? Would there really be a bright and fruitful year? Li Shimin had to be cautious. After all, this was something that concerned the safety of all the people in the world. Once something went wrong, there would be consequences beyond redemption. This consequence, Li Shimin couldn't afford it. Not to mention whether there would be a plague of locusts next year. Even if there was no plague of locusts, the people had to be fed. This year's plague of locusts had wiped out the foundation of the whole Tang dynasty. What could Li Shimin do? What could he do? Chapter 1454. In fact, to put it bluntly, this thing was good. He, Li Shimin, also wanted to do it, but this thing consumed too much food. Originally, 1 mu of land required 1 gene of seeds. Now, Li Shimin calculated that it was at least 3 times the amount. This was not including the other things. Then what was the use of picking the rest? Eating? That was to say, on average, a family with more than 10 mu of land would need at least 30 gene of wheat to be able to filter out the seeds. How many people were there in the Tang dynasty? How many people were there in the Tang dynasty? How much food was there? If this was a normal day, it would be fine. They could save it all. But at this time, how could they save it? Not to mention the seeds, even now, there was not enough to eat. The food they had now was basically all of Li Shimin's savings. If something were to happen, he would have to starve. At this time, Li Shimin did not dare to imagine what would happen if something were to happen in the future. After all, although there was no news from Chotzi for the time being, a war with Chotzi would happen sooner or later. Once it broke out, it would be the most terrifying thing. At that time, there would be no food at all. Then, at this time, Li Shimin's worried face stunned Li Chengqian. He looked at the expressions of Yu Shernan, Yu Qigong, and the others. Although their eyes were full of surprise and love when they looked at the seeds, there seemed to be some worry. Li Chengqian could not help but ask in surprise, "Father, you are?" Li Shimin sighed and glanced at Zhang Feng in the villa, then said, "This matter, let's not talk about it for now. This matter can be discussed later." Hearing this, Li Chengqian hurriedly said, "Father, you have seen this seed. If it is really popularized, then as Fengzi said, the Tang dynasty will really not lack food anymore. This is a good thing. How about? Do you know that the Tang dynasty really can't afford to waste this thing at this time? Do you know how much food we have now? Gone. They were all gone. Even the grain stored in the prefecture has been released. But this is still not enough to satisfy the people of the entire Tang dynasty. What do you think will happen if Fengzi's set of things are brought out at this time?" Li Chengqian hurriedly said, "Father, that's where you're wrong. Actually, Fengzi has already said that although this method wastes food, the filtered food can still be eaten. This doesn't mean that all of it can be wasted. Furthermore, look at the quality of the seeds. Think about the pigs that Fengzi mentioned before." Instantly. Only then did everyone remember the 300,000 pigs that had rushed up the mountain. At this time, hearing Li Chengqian mention it, Chang Yaojin asked in surprise, "Didn't the pig's gizzard already finish?" "That's right. Speaking of those pigs, didn't Fengzi slaughter all of them in the food factory at the foot of the mountain last time? Why are you bringing this up now? Yu Shernan and the others didn't care about these things." It could be said that after Zhang Feng brought those pigs up the mountain, they didn't pay attention to this matter anymore. In addition, last time Zhang Feng went to slaughter those pigs down the mountain with great fanfare. After that, they didn't pay attention to this matter anymore. They only knew that Zhang Feng, Li Chengqian, and the others made a lot of achievements in Chang'an City, and then the same thing happened in the whole Tang dynasty. For a while, because of the locust disaster, more than half of the pigs that were brought over from Tubo disappeared in an instant. At this time, when they heard Li Chengqian mention it, they couldn't help but be shocked. Ouying soon hurriedly asked, "Tell us in detail. Did Fengzi start to do this thing again? Then what's the matter with the pigs?" Li Shimin was also a little surprised. Li Chengqian glanced at them and said with a stiff face, "Do you still remember why Fengzi asked old Gao and the others to go up the mountain?" After asking this question, in an instant, Li Shimin and the others thought of the purpose of old Gao and the others to go up the mountain. It was all for the sake of baiting pigs. Could it be? For a while, they couldn't help but look strange. They looked at Zhang Feng, who was lying on the chair in the villa behind them, and asked, "Aren't the pigs all gone?" At this time, what do you mean by this? Li Chengqian said speechlessly, "Although the pigs on the mountain are gone, do you still remember the butcher? Zheng Tufu? The one who used to live in the gray building with old Gao." That butcher instantly reminded Li Shimin and the others. They seemed to have also found that they hadn't seen him for a long time, so they asked in surprise, "Qian, tell me this matter in detail." Then Li Chengqian told him everything about how the pigs were selected for breeding, and how Zheng Tufu went down the mountain to promote this new breed of pig that did not have a bad smell, and how they could grow 200 caddies of fat pigs in 3 months, as well as the pig feed. He told him everything in detail. This time, not to mention Li Shimin. Even Yu Shernan and the others looked at each other with a dumbfounded expression. This matter seemed to be a small matter. But what did this mean? In the short span of 2 months, Zhang Feng had already changed the breed of pig that everyone despised. And now, although they hadn't seen that kind of pig, but thinking about it carefully, it seemed that the pork they ate now didn't have a bad smell. Li Shimin looked at Zhang Feng's villa in surprise and said, "I finally understand why this guy asked me for a carpenter so mysteriously. I see. Chapter 1455. Before. They really didn't understand why Zhang Feng would spend so much effort to optimize and screen the seeds. In their opinion, as long as they used this phosphate fertilizer, even if it was a little thin, it would still be able to make the majority of the Zhuang family survive. Moreover, although some of the seeds were shriveled, they would still be able to survive with the help of the phosphate fertilizer. But now, it was Zhang Feng who single-handedly handled the matter of the pigs. At the beginning, he bought a lot of pigs, chickens, and ducks from Tubo Turks and other places to help kill the locusts. Then, after the locusts were killed, these things became a burden. Then, he opened a food factory on the mountain. Zhang Feng tweaked all the stinky pork into something edible. Even the people in the court were basically using this kind of fresh thing. This was all because the Tangs at this time were basically tired of eating horse meat, donkey meat, and mutton meat. And this kind of thing, which they usually despised, suddenly became a popular food. This made people want to have a lively and fresh time. There was also a kind of magical trading method. They didn't want money but only food. This kind of strange method was simply unprecedented. At this time, it appeared in Chong'an and instantly attracted a large number of fans. This was all because of the amazing effect of the pork and the daily Chinese medicine. Even in Li Shimin's imperial kitchen, this dish was a must-have dish every day. This pork was fat but not greasy, unlike beef and mutton, which was hot and dry after eating. Moreover, after eating it, one's entire body would be smelled of something fishy. In their cognition, the pork, which had always been more stinky than beef and mutton, had become so delicious. And the most important thing was, this thing was actually so cheap that it was half dead. Even ordinary people could afford to eat it. Unconsciously, this thing had already made people think that this pork originally tasted like that. There were also rumors that this pork trotter had the effect of beautifying and nourishing one's skin. As long as one bought the prescription of Dr. Sun in the Chong'an Hotel and boiled it, it would work. In an instant, the whole pork directly became popular in the Tang dynasty. Of course, everyone understood. Who was divine Dr. Sun? Would he lower himself to develop a beauty soup for such a trivial matter? This was definitely Zhang Feng's method, without a doubt. At this moment, when Li Changqian mentioned it, everyone suddenly realized that there was indeed such a thing. Now, most of the butchers in the food factory had changed professions. Furthermore, the river water was no longer blood red like it used to be. At this moment, everyone instantly understood that all of this had been planned by this kid for a long time. It was just that they had been paying attention to other things. Regarding this food thing, it seemed they had long stopped caring about it. Come to think of it, Zhang Feng hadn't personally cooked for them during this period of time except for the grilled fish last time. At the thought of this, everyone looked at Zhang Feng in the room at the same time. Moreover, the most important thing was, at this time no matter how much he said, it would be a wild guess. Rather than that, he might as well ask Zhang Feng about it. At this moment, following the sound of horse hooves, everyone couldn't help but stop in their tracks. They suddenly looked over and saw Ma Xinliang rushing over with a bulging cloth bag on his back. Everyone's eyes instantly lit up. When Ma Xinliang arrived, Li Changqian hurriedly stopped Ma Xinliang and asked, "What's the matter? Did you go to buy land?" Before Li Changqian finished asking, Yu Qigong asked directly. Ma Xinliang naturally recognized these people, especially that Yu Qigong who bit the golden bull and entered the Tower of Dusk. How could the people who were with them be ordinary people? Moreover, several great scholars were here, so he didn't dare to act rashly. He hurriedly said, "Yes, I did go to buy land under the order of the dean." They secretly said, "As expected." Feng Xuanling's eyes flashed and he asked, "Did you buy the land at the city gate?" In an instant, everyone's eyes were fixed on Ma Xinliang. This guy was a veteran who retired from the battlefield and the instructor of the Liangzhou garrison. If he didn't know the purpose of this land, Li Shimin would really kill him. Seeing this, Ma Xinliang naturally knew the importance of this place. At this time when he heard Feng Xuanling's question, he hurriedly said, "Although the dean asked for that land, I know how extraordinary it is. No matter how bold I am, I don't dare to buy that land. Moreover, Master Niu directly skipped that land and gave us the land from the Shirley Slope to the Shao Mountain." Hearing this, Li Shimin and the others breathed a sigh of relief, and their hanging hearts slowly relaxed. Seeing this, Yu Qigong said, "You don't have to go in for such a small matter. I'll go in and tell Fengzi. Just give me the land deed. Here." Although Ma Xinliang was hesitant, he still carefully handed the bag on his back to Yu Qigong. Although the bag wasn't big, it was quite heavy. He asked in surprise, "What's in it? It's so heavy." "It's all land deeds." Ha! Hearing this, everyone's expression froze. Yu Qigong waited in surprise and asked, "Tell me honestly, how much land did you buy?" "Well, not much, just 300 hectares. In an instant, Li Shimin's vision went black. He staggered and fell to the ground.